Chapter 1973. Once the time limit was exceeded, there was a possibility that he would never have to walk again in this lifetime. Go! Chu Yang, who was so tired that he had buried his head in dirty water, suddenly jumped up and issued an order. School www.guncom leave? Everyone smiled bitterly. Could he still walk? Everyone wanted to leave, but if they didn't, it would mean that they were inching closer and closer to death. But their physical and mental exhaustion made everyone feel like they were better off dead than alive. They truly felt that it would be better to die here than to continue fleeing without any hope. Some of them even planned to turn around and kill a few of their pursuers. At the very least, they wouldn't have to face the seemingly endless pursuit of the Grim Reaper. His throat, his stomach, and his entire internal organs seemed to be on fire. Chu Yang hesitated for a moment. Then, he took out a big bowl from his ring. He scooped a bowl of muddy soup from the ground, and then took out an incomplete version of the heavy pill. Suddenly, a fragrant aroma filled everyone's nostrils. Everyone's Adam's apple trembled up and down, and their eyes shot out a sincere desire. Chu Yang was silent for a moment. Then, he crushed the heavy pill, which was emitting a sweet fragrance at this moment, and completely dissolved it into the bowl of murky water. Chu Yang raised the bowl and said in a low voice, "Come, each of you will have a mouthful. The main thing is, don't drink it all in one gulp." Everyone was shocked and looked at each other in dismay. This was a life-saving medicine. Everyone was experienced in the Jianghu, so they naturally understood. However, at that moment, although everyone was yearning for it, they were also hesitating. Should I drink it? Can I drink it? I drank it. Was it still useful? Chu Yang moved closer to a person, but this person's reaction was to tilt his head away. He said, "You drink first. You drink first. No, you drink first." In the face of life-saving medicine, no one was willing to make the first move. Chu Yang's eyes were a little moist. He cleared his throat and said in a low voice, "Brothers, all the brothers who have survived, we have more than 150 brothers who have fallen here, and they have given their all without any regrets. He used up all of his life force just to give us a chance to escape. They were all like that. With a boom, they turned into smoke. Don't tell me you want their deaths to be in vain? No matter what, we have to hold on and give it our all. Carry on with this impossible escape until we escape with our lives. There's some medicine in this bowl of water. Drink it and you'll have more strength. Everyone, take a small sip. It should be enough." Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, "Everyone here is experienced in Jianghu. We can totally calculate how many people can drink this bowl of water." He only needed to drink his own mouthful. Wouldn't it be better for everyone to escape together? Even if it's not for ourselves, we have to think about those who died for us, and the people they entrusted to us. They died for us. We have to live for them and try our best to live on. Under Chu Yang's earnest and well-intentioned urging, everyone's hands and lips trembled. He took a sip. A small bite. Then, everyone clearly felt that their bodies, which had been completely dried up before, suddenly burst into a raging fire. In an instant, the energy that had disappeared started to gather again bit by bit and gradually grew. No one dared to drink too much of such a miraculous medicine. Because there was definitely not a lot of this medicine. It could be seen from how much Chu Yang treasured it. After the 50 people drank it, the big bowl returned to Chu Yang's hands. There was still a small half of it left. Chu Yang's heart ached. He took out a small jade bottle from his ring and carefully poured this half bowl of murky water into it. He carefully put it away. Everyone's eyes sparkled as they watched Chu Yang carefully put away this small half bowl of water. At this moment, something called hope inexplicably rose from the bottom of everyone's eyes. There's still some of this medicine left. Next time, everyone should take a small sip. It should be able to hold on one more time. After 2 more times, maybe we can escape with our lives. Go! Chu Yang ordered again. The 50 people moved at the same time. In the misty autumn rain, Their bodies were covered in mud and they moved towards the vast unknown fate. Chu Yang didn't know how many days had passed. Ever since he started to escape, he seemed to have lost track of time. What was daytime? What was night? He couldn't tell. It was as if these were no longer important. He only knew that ever since it started to rain, he was constantly being chased. Along the way, Chu Yang had already lost count of how many battles he had encountered. Because this was also not important. The only important thing was to break out of the encirclement and survive. After breaking out of the encirclement once again, Elder Baiyu-chen lost an arm. She only realized this after breaking out of the encirclement. Regarding this, Baiyu-chen said self-deprecatingly, "In the past, when I read some legendary novels, there would always be a battle where someone would be stabbed by a sword. After that, the battle would start again. Now I know that those are all lies." As Baiyu-chen watched Che-Shuchu bandage her wound, she said self-deprecatingly, "In a battle like this, one's eyes are already red. The only thing they know is to charge out. Why would they care if they're missing a part of their body? If I was killed at that time, I would have died in such a muddle-headed way. In fact, if I really had time to think about other things, I think I would have already self-destructed. Without an arm, my fighting power would be greatly reduced. But now, I don't have such thoughts. What's the big deal about losing an arm? I still have an arm, and a right hand that can hold a sword. It doesn't matter." Chu Yang couldn't help but laugh and said, "Elder Bai's words are really interesting. However, being injured and screaming is a natural reaction as a living being. It's impossible that it doesn't exist. It's just that it's rare for us to fight so selflessly. A highly concentrated battle consciousness automatically ignores the basic senses of the human body." Everyone laughed hoarsely. Along the way, they had been trembling in fear and despair at the beginning. Those negative feelings were slowly disappearing bit by bit. By now, everyone was already indifferent to life and death. Chu Yang used all his intelligence and thought of countless ways to get rid of the pursuers. Escaping from death again and again slowly trained these people's nerves to be incomparably tough. From the grief of seeing their comrades die at the beginning, to the numbness and indifference now. Occasionally, they would even make a few jokes. This wasn't heartless, but really indifferent. Maybe next time, I'll be lying there like them. It seemed like there was really nothing to be sad about. Chu Yang was also calculating his own strength. Now, he was left with the last 30 people. Every time he encountered a battle, he would lose a few people. It's just that the recent few times, the number of casualties had decreased. It seemed that the pursuers were gradually getting tired. And the pursuers didn't have a heaven-defying treasure like his incomplete version of heavy pills. However, Chu Yang's incomplete version of the heavy pill was only left with one last pill. If he still needed to use it, then he could only use the super heavy pills. If all these things were used up, he wouldn't have any left. At that time, even if he was injured, he could only wait for death. Villa Master Chu. Chu Yang was deep in thought. Suddenly, he heard Baiyu-chen call out. Chu Yang turned his head. "I want to say a few words." Baiyu-chen smiled, then his face became serious. "This is also what we all want to say. We've been through life and death together for so long. At this moment, I really feel uncomfortable if I don't say it." Chu Yang sat up straight. He said seriously, "Please speak. These days, we've all seen it. Villa Master Chu. You're really a person who can do great things," Baiyu-chen said. "Every time we fought, you were always at the forefront. Every strategy and plan came from your hands. If it weren't for Villa Master Chu, we would have been annihilated more than once by Mo Yuntian's huge army. We might have been annihilated the first time, or even the second time. However, it is precisely Villa Master Chu that has brought us step by step, and forcibly withstood it all." This old man can say this responsibly, looking at the current world, except for Villa Master Chu. If it was anyone else, even if it was Emperor 1, Empress 1, or even His Majesty the Holy Monarch, if they were in the same situation now, they would definitely not do better than Villa Master Chu. At this point, everyone nodded their heads in agreement. And looking at Chu Yang, their eyes were full of trust and passion. All along, we've been the ones protecting others. There has never been anyone like Villa Master Chu who would protect us in such a meticulous manner, leading us forward. So, Villa Master Chu is now the person I, Bai Yuqin, respect the most. You're also the person I, Bai Yuqin, admire the most in my life. We don't have much time. Here, I'll make it short. Bai Yuqin's eyes were burning. He interrupted Chu Yang's words. If we can't escape death in the end, then we can die without regrets. To die under Villa Master Chu's leadership, we won't have any complaints. We'll even feel honored. But if we can escape alive in the end, then we won't go back to Moyutian anymore. We want to follow Villa Master Chu from now on and do great things together. Although Bai Yuqin's voice was low, it was powerful. We also want to see what kind of achievements a person like Villa Master Chu can achieve in the end. We hope that Villa Master Chu will accept the loyalty of us defeated soldiers. From now on I, Bai Yuqin, will only be loyal to Villa Master Chu Yang in this world. Bai Yuqin raised his remaining hand and swore solemnly. Chapter 1974. The others had the same reaction. They looked at Chu Yang with the same fervor and trust. Chu Yang's performance these days had already conquered everyone here, including many who had already died in battle. Which leader could share weal and woe with his subordinates like this? When a leader was with his subordinates, would he charge at the front and enjoy at the back? And which leader could be like Chu Yang, never yielding in any adversity and never giving up? Fighting all the time? Fighting all the time on the front line. Although he had always been on the run. This is from P. Although his strength was still very weak. However, if such a person is not worthy of your loyalty, then who is? Even Chu Yang himself didn't realize that Bai Yuqin and the others had been speaking to him more and more respectfully recently. Originally, when they were talking to Chu Yang, everyone had straightened their backs and raised their necks. But recently, they had already bent their backs slightly, lowered their heads, and spoke humbly. And this kind of action had gradually become a habit, a subconscious action. In the past, they used to address Chu Yang as Villa Master Chu Kama Yu or Villa Master Sir. But now, they had automatically changed to you. Today, at this moment, they had even directly expressed their loyalty. This was a very short period of time in reality, but the process seemed to be very long. Even Chu Yang himself did not deliberately do anything, nor did he pay attention to anything. But it was so natural that it had reached this step. Everyone stood up neatly and bowed. Villa Master, please accept our loyalty! Previously, they had no way out and could only rely on Chu Yang. At that time, their hearts were filled with unwillingness. But now, they were filled with eagerness that Chu Yang could agree to their loyalty wholeheartedly. Chu Yang's heart warmed. He said, "Don't tell me that after this, you don't want to go back to Black Cloud Sky? You must know that your families and your businesses are still in Black Cloud Sky. If you stay here like this, we can't go back anymore. Or rather, whether we can survive or not is another matter," Bai Yuqin said sadly. "Now we have no way out. It's rare to find someone worthy of our loyalty. Please accept our request." Okay. Chu Yang was not pretentious either. In this period of time, he was also sincerely moved by these people. He said solemnly, "Since that's the case, then let's carve out a new world together. It's still too early to say anything now. I can only say that when we get out of this crisis, or when we achieve greater things in the future, I will let all of you go home in glory. There will definitely be a day when all of you return home in glory. Gloriously, even Black Cloud Heavenly Emperor will not dare to do anything to you guys. But such a goal, we need to work together. Create it together." Chu Yang's eyes flashed like lightning. "Since you want to be loyal to me, then from now on, this is my first order. Manor Lord, please instruct us." Everyone stood up straight. Don't use the word death lightly at any time. Chu Yang took a deep breath. "You must know. At the very least, when you said the word die, you were still alive. If you're not, then die. Yes. Villa Master's teachings, everyone agreed in a low voice. Death, however, was only a single word. But if it was said from the mouth for a long time, then when encountering a major calamity, they would naturally give up resistance from the bottom of their hearts. Even if your hands were still fighting, if your heart had no hope, how could you still live on? This was a psychological problem. Actually, there were quite a number of people who sacrificed previously. They might not have no strength to fight again. But they would rather choose a quick death. It was because their hopes were no longer on themselves, and they were all entrusted to others. This way, they also lost the motivation to work hard to live on, intentionally or unintentionally. As for more systematic things, Chu Yang did not know either. But he knew one thing: as long as you still wanted to live on, and had a very strong desire to live on, then there would definitely be a way to survive. Heavens! There was no dead end. Another few days passed. The rain still did not stop. Furthermore, there was still a trend of getting heavier and heavier. Chu Yang and the rest were already exhausted to the peak. It was another 7 to 8 battles in a row. But these few battles, there actually did not appear to be casualties. This was simply somewhat inconceivable in the eyes of Bai Yu-chen and the rest. "We are made of flesh and blood, and so are the enemies." Chu Yang revealed the essence of the matter with one sentence. "We are tired, but they are even more tired. Because the work they have to do is far more than what we have to do. And we only need to run as we wish. As long as it is not within their expectations, we can fly freely in the sky. Another point is also very important. We are running for our own lives, but they are chasing us to complete the mission given to them by others. This is the fundamental difference. If this situation continues, as long as we don't die and continue to run, then we can even drag these 10,000 people to death, and tire them to death. Perhaps, we can even kill a saint-level expert in the end." Chu Yang laughed. Everyone also relaxed and laughed. Their laughter was actually quite pleasant. Everyone knew that dragging and exhausting the enemy to death was absolutely impossible. As for killing a saint-level expert, that was even more nonsense. But there was no doubt that Chu Yang's words were very satisfying. Everyone felt a heartfelt sense of comfort in their hearts. It was as if they had already seen those ink cloud guards being dragged and exhausted to death, and even that old fellow Meng Wuya dying, in everyone's imagination, although Meng Wuya, who had been reduced to a state of death, would not really die. He was really suffering during this period of time. He really had a taste of what it meant to be badly battered. Since the encounter in the forest, it was not only the beginning of a nightmare for Chu Yang and the rest, it was also the beginning of a nightmare for Meng Wuya. After that battle, it began to rain. Then, everything entered an unknown state. Originally, they thought that as long as they locked on to Chu Yang and the rest and caught up to them, then Chu Yang and the rest would not be able to escape. At least in the hearts of the people of Ink Cloud Sky, whether it was the Ink Cloud Guards, the silver-armored guards, or even Meng Wuya himself, they all thought so. 10,000 people against 100 people, and everyone's cultivation was about the same. The other side even had a saint-level expert like Meng Wuya holding the line. If there were still any accidents, then they might as well bang their head and die. However, the outcome of the matter proved that Meng Wuya was the one who should bang his head and die. They used all the means that they could use, encircling, intercepting, ambushing, and so on. However, Chu Yang was always able to find the weakest link and break out of the encirclement. Then, the cycle repeated again and again, spiraling back and forth. Every time, there would be casualties on Chu Yang's side, but the problem was that there would also be casualties on Meng Wuya's side. After dozens of consecutive battles, the Ink Cloud Sky soldiers that had a total of 10,000 people had now been reduced to less than 5,000 people. More than 3,500 experts had disappeared just like that. The casualties were actually more than 10 times that of the other side. And that damned culprit Chu Yang, how he should escape was still how he should escape. Clearly, They had already felt that this group of people had collapsed to the extreme in the previous moment, but the next moment, they were still able to charge over energetically. Originally, they thought that even if they had to endure, they would be able to make these people collapse. But now, it seemed that the final result was very likely that everyone would collapse together. It was also possible that the people on their side would collapse first before the other side did. The only impossible thing was that before their side collapsed, the other side would collapse first. Why was it impossible? They really did not know what kind of evil method that Chu Yang had used. Although that group of people died less and less, each one of them was actually becoming more and more difficult to deal with. And they could clearly feel that these people's mental endurance and mental toughness were actually getting higher and higher. Not risking their lives for despair, but persevering for hope. This could not go on. Meng Huya furrowed his brows and pondered. He felt that his usually clear mind was now like a pile of paste. Kong Zi grasped a tyrannical strength that was hundreds of times stronger than the other side, enough to crush the other side, but he was still unable to use it completely. If he only pursued from one side, the other side could relax and run. If he attacked from two sides, this kind of opportunity was too little. If he attacked from four sides, not to mention that the opportunity was too little, there would definitely be a weak point. If the other side attacked the weak point with all their strength, as long as they broke through, they could escape far away. If he wanted to completely encircle the other side like an iron bucket, such an opportunity simply did not exist. That damn Chu Yang did not know what kind of medicine he ate, but he could always detect his intentions in advance. He was simply not a human, but a demon, a monster. If he was not injured, then he could have wiped out these guys in one fell swoop by himself, and he would not have to bear any losses. But that damned soul tribulation had left him too serious of an injury. Although it was not fatal, it had fundamentally eliminated the possibility of him personally taking action. Once he took action by force, the only result would be the collapse of his meridians and death. This kind of situation was really depressing. If he used the flying boat, the target would be too obvious. As long as the other side saw the flying boat circling, they would immediately know his plan, and it would be even more impossible to succeed. Meng Huya, who was at his wits' end, was in a dilemma. Leading so many people to constantly roll and fight in the mud every day, this was not something an ordinary person could do. Every time he saw the resentful eyes of his subordinates, as well as their tired bodies, Meng Huya felt great pressure. Sigh, I can't surround them, I can't catch up, the flying boat can't be used, the flying boat, huh? The flying boat. Meng Huya was in a state of melancholy, but suddenly his mind flashed, and his eyes lit up. Then he stood up with a schwa sound. Pass down my order! Chapter 1975. Among the people around Chu Yang, almost half of them were at the celestial being level. This is from P. But at this moment, everyone was a little shocked by this situation. When they broke through to the celestial being level, there wasn't such a big movement. Wasn't this movement a little too big? But the next moment, Chu Yang let out a long cry and shouted, Meng Huya! Boom! When he shouted this, the dantian in his body suddenly swelled and exploded at the same time. All the spiritual energy instantly gathered into a ball, rumbling and rotating in his body. The clouds in the sky seemed to be undergoing some special changes. However, no one noticed the subtle change. How could there be no clouds in the pouring rain? Above the cumulonimbus clouds, countless dark clouds rushed over at lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, they formed a thick cloud with a strong destructive aura. Heavenly punishment. That's right, it was heavenly punishment. The dark clouds in the sky continued to gather, forming a huge eye in the sky. But this eye was formed above the cumulonimbus clouds. The awe-inspiring power of heaven and earth was contained but not released, so no one noticed it except for the person involved, Chu Yang. Heavenly punishment didn't exist at all in Chu Yang's previous breakthroughs. That was because his tribulation space carried the power of someone who surpassed heavenly punishment. Unless the level of heavenly punishment exceeded the creator of the tribulation space, it would never be able to affect him. But now, the tribulation space couldn't be opened and was closed in disguise. Chu Yang's breakthrough this time inevitably attracted heavenly punishment. For ordinary people, there was only one heavenly punishment when they broke through. The eye of heaven, thunder and lightning flashed. Those who went against heaven must be punished by heavenly punishment. But Chu Yang's breakthrough attracted heavenly punishment at once. This naturally had a lot to do with his dantian. Chu Yang was the first to realize that his breakthrough had attracted the heavenly punishment. Moreover, he had attracted so many of them in one go. But at this moment, instead of being shocked, he was happy. He wanted to fight desperately after the breakthrough, but now it seemed that there was another way to go. If he encountered heavenly punishment on the road to death, would it be a positive? Once I rush over, immediately break out of the encirclement. Go as far as you can. Don't worry about me, do you hear me? Chu Yang said in a deep voice. Manor Lord! Everyone turned pale with fright. If you still regard me as the Manor Lord, then I'll be the Manor Lord. Listen to my orders, Chu Yang said. Leave behind the secret signal that we've arranged beforehand. If I can escape, I'll naturally look for you at the first moment. Don't come to the place where I'm at. I already have a plan to escape. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. Chu Yang laughed heartily. Suddenly, he leaped out and stood on top of the tree. He shouted, Who wants to kill me? Who dares to kill me? Who can kill me? His laughter was a kind of arrogant attitude that showed disdain for the world. All of a sudden, it exploded. Bai Yu-chen and the others looked at Chu Yang with great reverence, and then quietly retreated. Chu Yang had already attracted everyone's attention. Everyone was gathering around him. At this moment, under the cover of Chu Yang's powerful breakthrough, the torrential rain and the escape of Bai Yu-chen and the others did not attract anyone's attention. This was because everyone's attention was already focused on Chu Yang. Chu Yang. He was the ultimate culprit. He was also everyone's primary goal in coming to the Eastern Royal Heavens this time. Heads surged like waves, rolling in from all directions. Whoosh! 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 Countless people leaped onto the treetops and faced Chu Yang. Although they did not know why Chu Yang was the only one left here and did not know where the others had gone. But as long as they caught Chu Yang, they would have completed their mission. As for the others, without Chu Yang leading them, they would definitely not be able to do anything. It was only a matter of time before they were all killed. Even if all of them escaped, it would not matter. The most difficult one to deal with was still Chu Yang alone. Chu Yang faced the huge army with his hands behind his back. There was a faint smile on his face as he stood in the wind. Although Chu Yang was alone at this moment, his demeanor at this moment made everyone admire him, regardless of whether they were enemies or allies. His clothes were already in tatters. Rather than saying that he was wearing them, it was more accurate to say that they were hanging on his body. He was covered in mud and blood and looked extremely pathetic. But when he stood on top of the tree with his hands behind his back, he looked like an emperor who controlled the world and was patrolling his territory. He had no regard for anything and everything. There was an indescribable domineering power and an indescribable ease. There was an indescribable sense of transcendence. Meng Wuya stepped out of the crowd and looked at Chu Yang. This was the second time they met after such a short period of time. Finally, this young genius had miscalculated. He had finally trapped him here, leaving him with no way out. The legend had been written. Was today the end of the chapter? Chu Yang, this is the second time we have met. It seems that this matter should be over. Meng Wuya let out a long sigh. I'm very sorry, and I'm also very sorry. You're such a peerless genius. If you were given another 100 years, I'm sure it would be difficult to find anyone who could contend with you. The meaning behind the heartfelt praise was tantamount to announcing the end of Chu Yang's life today. Without a future, what was the meaning of a high evaluation? Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, It should be over? Is that true? I don't think so. Especially after hearing your praise for me, my will to live has become even stronger. Meng Wuya smiled. You won't have the chance. In such a situation, you can only face my 1,000-strong army alone. Almost every one of their cultivation is not weaker than yours. Could it be that you still have the power to turn the situation around? Do you think that you are that undying divine soul? Chu Yang, don't put up any unnecessary resistance. To be honest, we don't want to make things difficult for you, and we don't want to kill you either. As long as you're willing to surrender, we can give you the best treatment on the way back to Moyun Sky. We'll let your last journey in life be more relaxed and happy. Meng Wuya said sincerely. I believe that you can trust me on this point. I really don't doubt this. But what about after I reach Moyun Sky? What will the result be? Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, Everything still has to end, right? At this point, everyone was speechless. Could it be that you still have delusions of having a way out after seeing the Lord Heavenly Emperor? The fact that we didn't make things difficult for you on the way back is already a huge risk. And this is still on the account that you are a real man, giving you an exceptional treatment. Otherwise, just for the sake of countless comrades dying in your hands, you won't be able to have an easy journey. It will definitely make your life worse than death. You actually still have delusions of wanting more. You really don't know what's good for you, and you really don't know what's good for you. The wind whistled. Everyone realized that the wind between heaven and earth. It seemed to have become bigger in an instant. The wind suddenly grew stronger, and the entire mountain forest creaked. It was the sound of countless large trees being blown to the side by the sudden increase in the wind, and they were on the verge of snapping. However, no matter how strong the wind was, the trees on which everyone was standing were still motionless. Other than the sudden increase in the wind, the rain in the sky also became thicker and thicker. There were also clouds. The clouds in the sky also seemed to be getting lower and lower. Thank you for your kindness, General. I will not surrender without a fight. Chu Yang smiled and said softly. His voice was low and hoarse, but it was filled with awe. He slowly raised his head. The cold determination in his eyes was the opposite of the indifference in his tone. Meng Wuya couldn't help but be startled, and his expression became serious. Then, Chu Yang's voice suddenly grew louder. Only the Chu Yang who died in battle. The Chu Yang who will never give up. In the cold voice, Chu Yang's body was like an arrow leaving the bow. He left the top of the tree and swooped down, bringing with him a stream of light. He rushed into the crowd. After he left, the big tree under him was broken by the strong wind with a kacha sound. The magnificent sword energy of the Calamity Sword surged out. The two enemies who were directly in front of him screamed miserably as they were split into 4 parts. He made his move. Facing more than 1,000 enemies in front of him, Chu Yang still chose to take the initiative to attack. 1 sword against 1,000. In such a desperate situation, he was like a lone hero who would never admit defeat, standing up and fighting fearlessly. However, 1 sword against 1,000 was a choice, but 1 sword against 1,000 was the result he hoped for. This result was too difficult to achieve. Chu Yang's voice grew louder and louder. From loud to roaring to roaring. I will never admit defeat! Chu Yang laughed wildly, and his body flashed like a ghost. The few cloud guards closest to him almost didn't have time to react, and there was already a lot of blood spurting out of their bodies. In this world, I have never submitted to anyone. Not in the past, not now, and not in the future. Chu Yang took 3 steps forward, and his hand sword slashed 3 times consecutively. What harm was there in slaughtering the world? More than a dozen figures tumbled and spun out. If you want to catch me, show me your ability. If you want to kill me, pay the price. Even if I can't beat you, you still have to spit out 3 mouthfuls of blood for me. I am Chu Yang. I was once a minister, and also known as the King of Hell. Starting from the grassroots, competing in the smoke of war, every step was difficult, every step was life and death. I was at the end of the road more than once. I died and lived, but I still strengthened myself. From nothing to now facing a Sky Emperor, even if I can't beat him, I am still Chu Yang. Still fighting the world sword test again. Meng Wuya, let's see how many lives you can take out to be buried with me! Chu Yang roared loudly. The long sword in his hand suddenly burst out with thousands of cold rays. The real, complete, first sword of the Calamity Sword technique. Under such extreme pressure, in such an extremely disadvantageous situation, Chu Yang successfully executed half a move. Although it was only half a move, countless screams and wails could be heard. Chapter 1976. Although Chu Yang had yet to pass the heavenly punishment, he already had the strength of a heaven-level expert. Moreover, this strength was at least twice as strong as a peak Deva-level expert. With such strength, and the support of the world's #1 divine weapon, the Calamity Sword, as well as a supreme sword technique like the Calamity Sword technique, it was easy to destroy opponents of the same level. Just now, by chance, the final move of the Calamity Sword technique had a great effect. Not only did it exceed Deva Mo Yun's imagination, it even exceeded Chu Yang's own expectations. The power of one sword had actually killed more than 50 enemies. The power of one move was actually so great. Meng Wuya watched as Chu Yang dashed left and right in front of his army. It was as if he had entered a no-man's land. No one was his match. Especially the power of his last sword move. It was frightening. It was shocking. Meng Wuya sighed. Then, it became dignified. Then, it became respectful. Such an enemy was worthy of anyone's respect. And the greatest respect for such an enemy was to use all one's strength to kill him. Meng Wuya said in a deep voice. Kill him with all your might! The strength that Chu Yang had displayed so far had greatly exceeded Meng Wuya's expectations. It was not weaker than a peak Deva-level expert. In other words, the power of Chu Yang's sword had reached the level of a half-step saint. If possible, Meng Wuya would rather do it himself, but with his current injuries, he was powerless to do so. He could only use the human wave tactic to encircle and annihilate Chu Yang. With a command, everyone moved at the same time. There were more than 300 people in this wave. Countless saber light and sword energy flew toward Chu Yang in a crisscrossing manner. Come on! Chu Yang laughed wildly. The Calamity Sword rumbled and the sword roared like a dragon. Hundreds of majestic sword energy flew like dragons in the sky. Every one of them collided head-on. At this moment, the huge amount of spiritual energy that had gathered in his body and had nowhere to vent was completely released in this sword. Boom! With a deafening bang, the sword chi on the battlefield intertwined and turned into a ball of blazing white light. Everyone present couldn't see anything and felt a stinging pain in their eyes. In great shock, they all turned around and retreated one after another. Chu Yang is facing hundreds of experts by himself. But he is still able to fight to such an extent. It was truly shocking. Without exception, a small chip appeared on the weapons of everyone who participated in the battle. Wow! Chu Yang's body suffered a severe backlash from the thousands of sword energies. He spouted out a mouthful of blood with a wah sound. Then, he flew high up in the sky like a kite with its string cut. He somersaulted dozens of times, and soared high into the sky. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the rolling figure. Everyone's eyes were filled with pity. This included the Ink Cloud guards who had never considered anything else. Everyone knew that even if Chu Yang didn't die after this attack, he wouldn't have the slightest power to fight back. The path of this hero who never gave up had come to an end. Once his body landed, it would be time to capture him in one fell swoop. This should be Chu Yang's final madness. However, Chu Yang's body continued to roll until he reached a big tree. Then, he suddenly straightened his waist, and ferociously kicked the tree trunk with his feet. Crack! A tree that was over 1,000 feet tall, so big that it would take dozens of people to wrap their arms around it, was snapped off from the tree. The top half of the tree crown flew out like a huge umbrella. It was as if it was floating in the air, and flew out hundreds of feet. Chu Yang's body left the treetops with a loud roar, and soared into the sky. He slowly flew toward the clouds in the sky. Roar! Chu Yang roared toward the sky, and his whole body's aura exploded. Hissing and roaring sounds were mixed with a mouthful of blood spurting out. A ferocious burst of energy, and an intense aura of a breakthrough instantly filled the heavens. Breakthrough? He actually broke through? Meng Wuya's face suddenly changed. As a profound cultivator, he was really confused at this moment. How could this be? How did Chu Yang suddenly make a breakthrough after that world-destroying blow? What was going on? Chu Yang already had such strength now. After breaking through, wouldn't it mean that he would at least have the strength of a saint? However, Meng Wuya had overestimated Chu Yang. In fact, Chu Yang's strength had increased greatly due to his breakthrough. And this process could be described as a sudden increase in strength. He had used his strength to defeat the enemy, and then received the heavenly punishment. It wasn't as exaggerated as Meng Wuya had imagined. However, the heavenly punishment caused by the breakthrough would definitely come. In the next moment, the whole sky suddenly darkened, as if the clouds in the sky suddenly pressed down. Meng Wuya's pupils shrank, and he looked at the sky with some fear. The clouds in the sky suddenly parted, and actually separated into clusters of clouds. The streaks of lightning were like dense clouds that had been nurtured for generations. They gathered in one place, but they were clearly separated. They rotated slowly, and almost instantly they formed a deep vortex. It was like a huge eye, hanging in the sky. What? Heavenly punishment! How can there be such a strange heavenly punishment? Meng Wuya's eyes almost popped out. If not for his eyes, there was a high chance that they would have shot out. A deep sense of powerlessness instantly enveloped Meng Wuya. This time, he was really screwed over by Chu Yang. All of Meng Wuya's grief and indignation at this moment came down to these 3 words. Looking over there were still many people leaping into the sky to chase after Chu Yang. However, such an action was no different from resisting and provoking the heavenly punishment. The heavenly punishment never cared about who it was facing. If it was just one person facing heaven's punishment, then the pressure he would have to bear would be great, but it would not reach a terrifying level. Under heaven's punishment, the danger is great, but most of the time, it would leave a chance for the person to survive. As long as you grasp it, then you will pass. But if you don't, then sorry. But this chance of survival had a prerequisite, and that was to not provoke the heavenly punishment. Once you did, not only would you lose your chance of survival, you would also have to bear the most terrifying counterattack. For example, because of the entanglement with Chu Yang, all of Mo Yuntian's people were here, and under the influence of the heavenly punishment, everyone was standing on the opposite side of the heavenly punishment. In other words, these people had all become the enemies of the heavenly punishment, targets to be eliminated. Under such circumstances, the heavenly punishment did not differentiate between friend and foe, and only knew how to attack together. This was not the main point. The heavenly punishment would not only attack everyone together, but the power of the heavenly punishment would also rise to an even more terrifying level. In terms of strength, this level of strength was enough to kill everyone facing it. And this level of strength was definitely not something that a person could bear. It was almost beyond the limits of what a human could resist. Even if one wanted to escape now, it would be useless. Escaping would only cause one to die faster. Under the heavenly punishment, how could it allow anyone to escape? Chu Yang! Are you crazy? Meng Wuya cried out miserably. He clearly understood the situation in front of him, but he was already powerless. He was unable to change this situation that was already destined to die. Crazy. Meng Wuya concluded that Chu Yang was crazy. Because, although this heavenly punishment would cause a large number of casualties in Mo Yuntian, the power of the heavenly punishment now had already surpassed Chu Yang's heavenly punishment by countless times. Chu Yang still had the heart of the heavenly punishment, and he would definitely not be spared. Chu Yang's body floated in the air, and he laughed loudly as he floated under the heavenly punishment. Since we must die, then let everyone accompany me on the road. This is a very profitable transaction. Those at the outermost area, leave immediately. Leave this place at full speed. Meng Wuya shouted with all his might. Those at the innermost area were already destined to face the heavenly punishment because of the influence of the heavenly punishment. They definitely could not escape. But those at the outermost area might still have a chance. It was just a possibility. Meng Wuya almost vomited blood as he yelled. More than 2,000 ink cloud guards and silver-armored soldiers at the outermost area heard him and dispersed. They were also high-level cultivators. How could they not understand the danger? Naturally, they retreated at full speed. However, countless green lightning bolts shot out from the sky. Even among those who escaped at the outermost area, there were hundreds of people who were identified by the heavenly punishment. The only thing these people could do was to come back and live and die with Chu Yang. Because if they ran again, they would only further implicate their companions. A total of more than 4,000 people, including Meng Wuya, were all wrapped up by Chu Yang and pulled onto the last bus to death. No one could leave, and no one could escape. If this last bus was destined to be destroyed, then everyone would go on the road together. If this was a boat that had already started to fill with water and was destined to sink, then everyone was now on the boat, waiting for the time to sink together. Quietly waiting to be overturned. The single eye in the sky rotated together, and then, countless different colored lightning bolts came crashing down. Boom, 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 the whole world started to tremble. The heavenly punishment that Chu Yang triggered was originally different from the rest. Now that it was catalyzed by Mo Yuntian and the rest, it had really reached an unprecedented level. I believe that it was not much different from the heavenly punishment of a true saint. If I can describe it, I would like to describe it like this: tens of thousands of atomic bombs, smashing towards the same place wave after wave. A lightning bolt struck towards Chu Yang. Chu Yang let out a long roar and danced excitedly. He turned into a streak of light, and dodged at an extremely fast speed. Moreover, he specially dodged towards a place where there were many people. He laughed loudly. Fighting in the land of heavenly punishment is also very enjoyable. I believe that in all your lives, you have never experienced such a wonderful thing, right? Ha ha. Come, let us have some fun together. Fuck you. More than 4,000 people cursed in their hearts. You damn bastard. You're really unlucky to have met him this time. Even in their dreams, they did not expect to meet the heavenly punishment head-on just to complete a mission to capture a person. And with such a huge commotion. This was simply an undeserved calamity. In this generation, who would have the chance to meet the heavenly punishment head-on before they had a breakthrough? Right now, I'm doing something that has never been done before and will never be done again. Chapter 1977. As for the heavenly punishment battle that Chu Yang mentioned, everyone was even more speechless. They just took it as Chu Yang farting. And it was the kind that was tasteless and didn't even have a stench. Unspecified currency, learn it, WB. Any unspecified currency now? At every moment, there were tens of thousands of lightning tribulations falling from the sky. Everyone couldn't wait to dodge, who still had the time to fight with you. Besides, fighting with you was equivalent to indirectly facing the most violent lightning tribulations. No one wanted to die so early. An ink cloud guard couldn't dodge in time and was struck by the tribulation thunder of heaven's punishment. With his cultivation, he would definitely be injured, but it wouldn't be fatal. However, after being struck by the tribulation thunder, he couldn't help but be slightly delayed for a moment. Then, countless tribulation thunder struck his body at the same time. In the blink of an eye, his entire body turned into black ashes that filled the sky. If there was a first, there would be a second. A third. As the lightning tribulations of the heavenly punishment intensified, such things would definitely become more frequent. Therefore, one by one, the ink cloud guards and silver-armored soldiers died under the lightning tribulations of the heavenly punishment. But if one were to say that Chu Yang didn't live up to his reputation of fighting under the heavenly punishment, then Chu Yang was really wrong. Chu Yang didn't intend to dodge at all. He only knew how to attack. Like a gust of wind, he flitted past everyone without stopping. No matter who it was, he would slash at them with his sword. Then, he would leave without caring about the result. Once the opponent was disturbed by Chu Yang's attack, how could they have time to dodge the lightning tribulations? They just had to take the lightning tribulations. As long as they were hit by the first one, they would be paralyzed for a moment. During this short period of paralysis, countless lightning tribulations would strike their bodies. The lightning in the sky seemed to have gone crazy, taking lives at an extremely fast speed. The lightning tribulations in the sky continued to fall endlessly, as if there would never be a moment of rest. At the beginning, the lightning tribulations were only as thick as a wrist. Then, they gradually increased to the thickness of a human head, waist, water tank, and finally as thick as a house. With a blue color, purple light flashed as they fell. Every lightning bolt could directly split a mountain into pieces. This was definitely not a metaphor. There was once a tall mountain that was coincidentally struck by a bolt of lightning and turned into a lake. The vicissitudes of life happened right in front of everyone's eyes. Everyone fled in all directions. However, Tian Fa also dispersed and chased after them, but its power was not reduced in the slightest. Meng Wuya couldn't help but cry as he looked at the scene before him. Suddenly, a strong hatred for Chu Yang rose in his heart. Even if you're my enemy, this move of yours is too ruthless, too ruthless. Meng Wuya had reached the level of a saint. He had already gone through the heavenly punishment, which was at the peak of the heavenly human stage. Therefore, his current situation was that as long as Meng Wuya did not move, the heavenly punishment would not look for him and would not level up. In the beginning, Meng Tianya had misjudged the level of Chu Yang's heavenly punishment, and had even set up all kinds of defensive measures. But when the heavenly punishment descended, he unexpectedly discovered that the heavenly punishment didn't target him at all. Only then did he realize that Chu Yang's heavenly punishment was a heavenly punishment. As long as he didn't act recklessly, he wouldn't be implicated. Therefore, Meng Wuya didn't dare to act recklessly. At most, he would give a warning. Once he moved, the heavenly punishment would look for people who provoked him. That would be an act of courting death. However, in the current situation, Meng Wuya still didn't move. The torture for him was even greater. He could only watch helplessly as his subordinates who had followed him for many years died miserably one by one. He could only watch helplessly as Chu Yang came and went. He kept causing trouble, but he couldn't move at all. To be more precise, he didn't dare to move. What kind of feeling was this exactly? This kind of feeling was worse than death for Meng Wuya. But he really couldn't move. He didn't dare to move. If he didn't move, the heavenly punishment wouldn't level up. Then, there would still be a chance for someone to survive. But if he moved, the heavenly punishment that descended again would be at the level of a saint. That would truly be the case where no one would survive. Meng Wuya's hands and feet trembled. He looked at Chu Yang laughing wildly as he shuttled back and forth in the pouring rain. And his subordinates were constantly being destroyed by the heavenly punishment. 2 streams of tears flowed down his face. During this time, it wasn't that there weren't any heavenly tribulation lightning that fell on Chu Yang's body. In fact, Chu Yang's heavenly tribulation lightning had already struck more than 100 times. But Chu Yang only frowned slightly. He didn't stop at all. He continued to run and dodge, even though his body was constantly emitting smoke. That was because his muscles had been penetrated by the lightning. Some of his muscles were even necrotic. They were already burning like dry firewood. But Chu Yang didn't care about this at all. He was still moving unhindered. He was still heroic. As he watched, the only thing Meng Wuya could do was to look up to the sky and sigh. He muttered, "If Chu Yang doesn't die in the end, there's no need to wait 100 years. At most 10 years, Mo Yutian will be in big trouble. Such an opponent is definitely anyone's nightmare. Once he's given time to grow, even if he's the first emperor's empress." Speaking until here, he was horrified. He actually didn't dare to think about it anymore. If he continued to think about it, he was afraid that it would also shatter what little confidence he had left. Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun undoubtedly sowed an unresolvable enmity with Chu Yang this time. Yuan Tianji definitely wouldn't give up on killing Chu Yang. And the result of every pursuit would only make the hatred in Chu Yang's heart stronger. If Chu Yang didn't die in the repeated pursuit, then these layers of pursuit would also turn around and destroy Chu Yang. A true powerhouse could only be tempered through countless life and death situations. But even Meng Wuya himself had seen countless of Chu Yang's life and death battles. Adding up all the life and death crises that a powerhouse had encountered in their tens of thousands of years of life, perhaps, couldn't even compare to Chu Yang's experience in this half a month. And this kind of experience would still continue. There were only two results. First, capture Chu Yang and kill him. Second, Chu Yang gradually grew. In the end, he would grow to the point where even Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun wouldn't dare to deal with him easily. What kind of existence was that kind of existence? Without a doubt, it was the level of Emperor 1. Or perhaps even higher. But Chu Yang was still so weak right now, and he had already stirred up a storm in the world. And he would never admit defeat, a personality that would never yield. Once it really reached that point, would Chu Yang choose to swallow his anger and live peacefully? Absolutely impossible. Meng Wuya was so frightened by his own imagination that his hair stood on end. Because now, he could already foresee that if Chu Yang could survive in this land of heavenly punishment, he might already be powerless against him. Heavenly punishment rumbled. More than 1,000 Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun experts had already perished here. The remaining ones were also hanging on bitterly. Being annihilated was only a matter of time. Chu Yang suddenly let out a long and loud cry. He brazenly flew up, and passed through the dense lightning bolts. The tribulation sword gave off a dazzling light. With a swoosh, it brought Chu Yang's body and disappeared in front of everyone. Immediately, heavenly punishment lightning followed. The lightning here was still continuing. Meng Wuya turned pale with fright. But he still couldn't move. He didn't dare to move. He could only grab the stones on the ground anxiously, his eyes wide open. Chu Yang was heading in the direction of the 3 flying boats. In the eyes of the guards on the flying boats, Chu Yang was like an indomitable, peerless demon god, flying over with endless wind and thunder. This was definitely not a description. It was a fact. It was a reality. Chu Yang himself might be small, but at this moment, he was riding on a sword. The lightning in the sky followed him as he moved. But it was mixed with a terrifying power that was enough to shake the world. It was like a small body, but it had wings that connected heaven and earth. Quick! Start the flying boats and avoid this bastard at full speed! Quick! But everything was too late. The moment they saw Chu Yang with their naked eyes, it was already too late to start the flying boats. Seeing Chu Yang getting closer and closer to them, and the lightning becoming more and more violent, the people on the flying boats jumped down without any backbone and ran away. Damn it! You have already harmed so many people. Don't take care of us too. Chu Yang's body approached the flying boats like lightning. The tribulation sword burst out with brilliant light, and ruthlessly dug a big hole in the sturdy body of the flying boats. Chu Yang rushed in and sneaked into the flying boats like a ghost. Finally, he could take a breath. Chu Yang decisively took out a super heavy pill and swallowed it. Just as he put the heavy pill into his mouth, he didn't even have time to check the furnishings of the flying boats, when he felt his body shake violently. At this moment, at least thousands of lightning bolts hit the flying boats. A glaring and extremely blazing white light suddenly flashed. That was the defensive power of the flying boats. The strongest self-defense mechanism was activated. Chu Yang rolled back and forth on the flying boats, like a rolling gourd. The second wave of the heavenly punishment tribulation thunder had already fallen, followed by the third wave, the fourth wave. Only by the third wave, the flying boats' defenses were completely destroyed. The next moment, a flying boat exploded with a bang. Under the heavenly punishment tribulation thunder, there was nothing it couldn't destroy. Although the flying boats were made of special materials, they still couldn't resist. Chu Yang pretended to scream, panicking like a stray dog. He was confused like a fish that had escaped the net. His target was the second flying boat. Boom, 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 and so on. Chu Yang laughed brilliantly and wantonly. He didn't care about the several wounds on his body that were emitting black smoke from the lightning strikes. He rushed all the way back. Behind him, the 3 super flying boats from Mo Yutian had already turned into 3 huge fireballs at this moment. The burning light almost illuminated half of the eastern royal sky. The 3 flying boats were destroyed by Chu Yang. Meng Hui's hands and feet were cold. How much manpower and material resources would it take to build 3 super flying boats like this? No one could be clearer than Meng Hui about this point. But now, it had been completely destroyed by Chu Yang in less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea. To the extent that they were even worse than scrap metal. Chapter 1978. Haha! This flying boat is really good, it's really resistant to attacks. Chu Yang looked up to the sky and laughed. He said wildly amidst the lightning and thunder. It can actually resist heaven's punishment for so long, ha! Good stuff, General Meng. General Meng! If you had known earlier, you might as well have given me one. Why bother? In the end, his joy turned to sorrow, and he was struck by lightning once. Meng Hui gritted his teeth and said angrily, Chu Yang! Don't be complacent. From today onwards, you and I are mortal enemies. Chu Yang laughed heartily. His sword forced a silver-armored soldier into a fluster. Then, lightning struck down and turned this silver-armored soldier into a fireball. Chu Yang laughed and said, General Meng, what are you talking about? I thought we were already mortal enemies. Could it be that you have never treated me as a mortal enemy before? Otherwise, why did you have to be mortal enemies after today? Are you a few years old and your brain is not as bright? Ha! Chu Yang only dared to provoke Meng Hui this time. He also knew that he could not attack Meng Hui today. It was a life and death situation now. He still had a chance of survival. But if he let Meng Hui attack, heaven's punishment would be upgraded to the level of a saint. He would be finished. Chu Yang laughed heartily. He turned over and stood up, once again entering the battlefield. At this moment, there were already many huge lake areas here. The originally lush forest was basically nowhere to be seen. Also, it was not as convenient for Chu Yang to find targets as before. It could even be said that it was very strenuous. Because there were fewer enemies to attack, and they were very scattered. He could only follow the lightning. But the danger of doing so would undoubtedly increase greatly. The person who suffered the most from heaven's punishment this time was still Chu Yang. Because after triggering heaven's punishment, the pressure Chu Yang had to bear was several times that of others. Especially his dantian, which had to bear different types of heaven's punishment. This made Chu Yang's situation even worse. If the spiritual energy in his body was not gushing out more and more crazily, if the calamity sword was not able to effectively block a considerable part of it, if he did not have heavy pills, at this moment, Chu Yang might have already turned into a piece of coal. The sky was filled with ashes. Even so, Chu Yang had nearly been turned into charcoal several times, and had the opportunity to turn into ashes. A battle of heavenly punishment was led into the battlefield by Chu Yang in such a manner. It completely changed the situation of the battle. The losses caused by this battle were already incalculable. Even if it was analyzed using the most basic and conservative method. Mo Yutian had over 1,000 people participating in this round of battle. Almost half of them were destroyed by the heavenly punishment. There were also the 3 flying boats and the others. Anyway, there were a lot of them. Chu Yang exhausted the last of his strength, and continued to rush out. But he still passed by Meng Hui when he was about to leave. He even waved his hand. General Meng! Come and chase me, didn't you want to fight to the death with me? Meng Hui gritted his teeth. If he could catch up. How can this old man let you escape unscathed? The problem now is that the heavenly punishment is about to pass. If I make a move now, none of the 1,000 or so people who barely survived will be able to survive. Therefore, a strange situation had occurred, Enemies were all around them. But everyone couldn't even take care of themselves and was struggling to survive. Chu Yang swaggered past Meng Wuya, and Meng Wuya could only look on helplessly as Chu Yang fluttered away. He couldn't stop him at all, and he didn't dare to. For such a situation to occur between two parties who were mortal enemies was simply an inconceivable scene. But under the huge threat of the heavenly punishment, this was the only way. Chu Yang took advantage of the fact that the heavenly punishment wasn't over, and the enemies didn't dare to chase after him, and flew into the forest like a meteor. In the sky behind him, a huge eye followed closely, and lightning flashed, preparing for the final attack. If he could survive this attack, Chu Yang would truly be promoted to the level of a celestial being. However, if he couldn't endure it, he would die and his Tao would vanish, turning into ashes. In a faraway place, Yen Russian and the Eastern Royal Heavens Army watched all this, and everyone's scalp went numb. No one would have thought that Chu Yang would use such a decisive method to fight against Mo Yutian. Fighting against the heavenly punishment. The fewer people there were, the better. And they had to concentrate all their energy and make all the preparations before they dared to try. Even so, they might not be able to survive safely. The probability of failure was almost as high as 100%. But Chu Yang's breakthrough was actually the more people there were, the better. What kind of bullshit motto was this? Seeing a huge mountain that stretched for 2,000 li being reduced to a flat plain, and even lakes appearing one after another, everyone's hearts trembled incomparably. Everyone couldn't help but sympathize with Mo Yuntian and his men. Encountering such a lunatic, such a lawless murderer, it was really, too unfortunate. Yen Russian first condemned Meng Wuya's act of burning the plains, and then extorted a huge sum of money from him. Then, he followed all the way, thinking about how to make a move at the crucial moment. But now, even Yen Russian felt a little speechless. Meng Wuya. Sigh, General Meng is really too pitiful now. If I were to be played like this. Oh, that would be a fate worse than death. But Chu Yang was facing the last heavenly punishment, and it was also the strongest one. Could he survive? Just as Yen Russian was guessing and worrying, and Meng Wuya was also waiting and looking forward to it, suddenly, a rainbow-colored light burst out from the sky. A brightly colored lightning ball with a purple luster suddenly formed. Then, as if it was going to drill through the entire earth, it fell with a loud bang. In the direction where Chu Yang had escaped. It was an unprecedentedly powerful attack. Meng Wuya stared at it, his eyes full of hope. Under the heavenly tribulation lightning, how could a demon like you not die? There was no justice in this world if you didn't die. Yen Russian and the rest also stared at it, their eyes full of hope. You are a monster, a legend. If you can't die under such destructive tribulation lightning, then you are a monster, a legend. Come on, create another miracle. You are a demon who specializes in creating miracles. Live on! Yen Russian prayed in his heart. The huge ball of lightning. It was as if it had hollowed out the entire sky, and it came crashing down, with a long tail behind it. In a flash, it crossed the distance between heaven and earth, even. Everyone could clearly see that the lightning made a turn, and it followed a strange trajectory that was filled with the principles of heaven and earth. It seemed that Chu Yang was still desperately trying to avoid it. But under the heavenly tribulation lightning, everything was in vain. Then, boom, an earth-shattering sound reverberated. This loud sound shook the earth, the sky, and everyone present was shocked. Even Meng Wuya, who had the highest cultivation level among them, felt dizzy at that moment. Then, a huge mushroom cloud rose from afar. Puff, 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 countless gravel of different sizes. It was more than 1,000 times denser than the densest rainstorm, and it spread out in all directions. The next moment, the forest within a few thousand miles was instantly riddled with holes, and it was a scene of devastation. Everyone's reaction was very consistent, and they all gasped in unison. Looking at the pile of gravel in front of them, everyone was speechless. Those shallow lakes that had just been blasted out were instantly filled up, and turned into piles of gravel. Countless people who had been lucky enough to survive the heavenly punishment were in the midst of regulating their breathing, and they were unprepared to be crushed under the gravel again. When they crawled out and looked at the situation in front of them, they only felt their hair stand on end. This was the first time the elders had seen such a profound change in the course of a single heavenly tribulation. It was 10 times, or even 100 times, more powerful than the legends. It was too exaggerated. In that case, would Chu Yang be able to survive such a terrifying heavenly punishment? This was undoubtedly the biggest question in everyone's heart. After all, Chu Yang's heavenly punishment this time had completely exceeded the degree of heavenly punishment that he should have withstood, and it was more than twice as strong. The last blow could not be avoided, and he could only face it head-on. But even if Meng Wuya was at his peak, he was not confident that he could take this blow, let alone Chu Yang, who had just broken through to the heavenly human stage. Was he destined to die under this attack? Meng Wuya firmly believed that this was the case. If this demon did not die, the heavens would not allow it. Yen Rushan also believed that Chu Yang had always been in existence that created miracles. He would definitely be fine. After this huge explosion, the eye in the sky suddenly disappeared, and turned back into a thick layer of clouds. Gradually, the wind also weakened, and only the downpour continued, and it was getting heavier and heavier. Raindrops the size of soybeans fell crazily, and people could not open their eyes. First, do a head count, and gather all the survivors and escapees together. Meng Wuya gave his first order after the heavenly punishment. His face was pale, and his body was trembling. When he said this, his voice even showed a sense of old and powerlessness. This situation had never happened to Meng Wuya before, and it was definitely not something that should have happened. But at this moment, this situation had happened. This encirclement of Chu Yang was a huge blow to Meng Wuya's confidence. Not long after, Mo Yuntian's team had gathered. Reporting to General, after the heavenly punishment, we still have 2,050 people left. The rest have already. The silver-armored commander stepped forward to report. Hearing this number, Meng Wuya's heart suddenly tightened, and an indescribable pain caused his vision to turn black. Today is Lazy Cat's birthday. Yes, she is the original form of the sneaky wife in the book, Lazy Cat. Hee hee, birthday girl. Let us wish the birthday star a happy birthday. Every year, we will have this day. Last night, I dragged my cousin to have a massage with me, and then we had dinner together. There was also a friend of my cousin's at the dinner table. Cough cough, the most amazing thing was that this friend was actually a fan of our book. One night. Interrogated me for an entire night. Fuck. All the questions about the plot were sorted out, and I had to answer them. It was like bubblegum sticking to me and not giving up. Chapter 1979. 2,050 people. Not long ago, he had brought 10,000 elites to the Eastern Royal Heavens. He was full of confidence and high spirits. Now, he had lost 70% of his men before the mission was completed. Facing such a huge loss, Meng Wuya felt an unbearable sense of defeat. More than 7,000 peak martial saints, and even heavenly human experts had fallen just like that. Just for one Chu Yang. Even now, they still couldn't confirm whether the main culprit had already perished in the world. Spread out some men and check carefully. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Even if it's his flesh and bones, I want to know if he's dead or alive. Meng Wuya's face was extremely ugly. Yes, sir. After a while, Mo Yuntian and the rest stood beside a huge lake that was obviously newly opened. They were speechless for a moment. This was the place where the huge lightning ball had landed. Right now, the center was still bubbling with water, and the water level was still rising rapidly. The torrential downpour had turned into countless torrents of water surging into this place. There was no one around. Then, was Chu Jiang alive? Or dead? Was he going to be reduced to ashes, or was he going to search? Search carefully. Don't let go of any clues. I want a definite answer, Meng Wuya ordered again. Yes, sir. At the same time, Yen Rushan and the rest had also landed. When they saw this, they were also dumbfounded and speechless. If Chu Yang was dead, this death hunt would naturally come to an end. But what if Chu Yang was still alive? Then, this hunt would have to continue. Meng Wuya was praying now. Heavens! Please open your eyes and let Chu Yang die. Such an enemy is really too scary. I don't have the energy to play with him anymore. Some hoped that Chu Yang would die, some hoped that he would live. But where was Chu Yang now? When the lightning ball landed, Chu Yang had already stopped in his tracks. There was no point in running. Facing the final attack of Tian Fa, there was no way to escape. He could only bear it. He had to bear it head on. If he could bear it, he would live. If he couldn't bear it, he would die. It was that simple. At that point in time, Chu Yang's situation had already left Meng Wuya and Mo Yuntian's line of sight. Meng Wuya didn't dare to chase after him, and the others either couldn't take care of themselves, or had already fled far away. As long as he could endure this final attack, everything would be over. However, the degree of terror of Tian Fa's final strike was still beyond Chu Yang's expectations. The moment the huge lightning ball smashed down, Chu Yang let out a muffled groan. His tribulation sword flashed crazily. It was as if he had really gone crazy and started to swing his sword to the extreme. This was definitely the fastest and most frequently wielded calamity sword that Chu Yang had ever used in his life. In that split second, even Chu Yang himself didn't know how many sword moves he had made. In any case, he just kept making sword moves without stopping. There was only one thought in his mind: sword-cutting heavenly thunder. This was a suicidal move, and it was also the ultimate move to defend oneself to the extreme. Clouds and clouds gather, as long as I am alive, you will not have to worry. Chu Yang seemed to have gone mad. His calamity sword flashed with thousands of strands of auspicious qi. In this short blink of an eye, Chu Yang had repeatedly used this move at least 10 times. In that split second, his dantian was emptied. All the power was swept away because of the sword move. And the rich spiritual energy that was constantly flowing in and washing Chu Yang's body was also emptied in that split second, a total of 10 times. A dense defensive sword net blocked the path of Tian Fa's attack just like that. The density of the sword net that Chu Yang had created reached a thickness of 1,000 feet. Surging and surging, it was like a sword mountain that had a life of its own. Chu Yang himself was hidden behind this mountain. With a boom, Tian Fa fell. It was a sword net without any tricks. Layer by layer, it was torn apart and disintegrated. In just a split second, it had already broken through half of the sword net's thickness. Chu Yang roared angrily. The sword intent carried all his essence, qi and spirit as it surged out. Immediately after, there was a huge explosion. Chu Yang felt as if there was a loud bang in his head. Then, he didn't know anything after that. This sword, whether it could be blocked or not, he had already done his best. The rest was up to heaven's will. If heaven's will favors me, I will live. If heaven's will forsake me, I will die. That was all. If someone happened to be in the vicinity of the heavenly punishment's final attack, they would discover that Chu Yang's body was like a small blade of grass in the midst of a hurricane. He would have been swept up by the hurricane, and would have fluttered into the sky. In the blink of an eye, he would have turned into a feather in the blue dome of heaven, and floated to an unknown location. No one knew how far he had floated. No one knew whether Chu Yang was dead or alive. With Chu Yang's current state, he was still unconscious. When the wind stopped, he fell freely. Could it be that the legendary strongest calamity sword master of the heavens was going to fall to his death? Wouldn't such a way of dying be a little too funny? It was too embarrassing. But in the current situation, it seemed like it was really possible. This was a small and quiet valley. At the end of the valley, there was a small hut. A girl in white, with a gentle face, was fetching water from the stream. She used a wooden bucket to carry the water back and poured it into the wooden basin. Inside the wooden basin was a pile of clothes. The sky was especially gloomy. It was obviously going to rain. Lightning flashed and thunder roared in the distance. It was unknown where the heavy rain had started, but it hadn't spread over yet. But the air was heavy and oppressive. In front of the hut, a tall and sturdy young man was sitting with his eyes closed. His whole body was flowing with a kind of sparkling blue light. This kind of color was obviously a sign of peak heaven level. Obviously, this young man was concentrating on cultivating. A broadsword was placed beside him. This broadsword was actually as big as this young man's figure, filled with a majestic aura. After a long while, the young man opened his eyes and stood up with a whoosh sound. "How was it today? Did you make any progress?" The girl blinked and asked. Her tone was full of concern. "It's going very well. I believe that in a few more days, I will be able to absorb all the hidden effects of the medicine." The tall and sturdy young man smiled slightly and said, "This Heaven Imperial Court is indeed a good place. When you and I were being hunted down, we thought that it would be impossible for us to survive. But who would have thought that we would encounter such a great opportunity at the critical moment of life and death? It allowed us to obtain this rare and miraculous medicine. It is true that fortune and misfortune depend on each other. My cultivation has increased by more than 10 levels in these 2 months. But I haven't fully absorbed the medicine's effects. There is still room for improvement. This is your fortune." The girl in white pursed her lips and smiled. "It's our fortune." The tall and sturdy young man held the girl in his arms and said dotingly. The girl in white leaned gently in his arms. Her face was full of happiness. "When I've fully absorbed the medicine, I'll bring you out to roam the martial world and find those old opponents. I believe they should have made considerable progress." The tall and sturdy young man laughed. Between his brows, there was a kind of fierce and domineering aura. "I want to let them have a taste of my current strength," the girl in white said confidently. "They're definitely not as good as you now." The tall and sturdy young man nodded and said, "That's not necessarily true. Since I can get such an opportunity, their opportunities may not be as good as mine. Even if we fight now, it's still hard to say who will win." He said it's still hard to say who will win, but his face was full of confidence. It was full of confidence that he would win. "After that wish is fulfilled, the two of us will build a foundation that belongs to us in this Heaven Imperial Court and create a future," the tall and sturdy young man said lightly. "We'll establish a foothold and challenge the world with our swords." The girl in white said softly, "We'll do whatever you say. Whatever you say, it's definitely right. I'll listen to you. Wherever you go, I'll follow you." The tall and sturdy young man smiled contentedly and said, "Yes, wherever I go, you'll follow me. Wherever you go, I'll be there." The girl nodded and her eyes were full of happiness and satisfaction. At this moment, there was a sudden swoosh sound, as if something flew over. The tall and sturdy young man was stunned and looked up. Just as he looked up, a human-shaped object flew over from the sky and smashed into the small thatched cottage with a boom. Boom! The thatched cottage was instantly torn into pieces. There was a bang sound, followed by Kacha. It seemed that the only bed in the thatched cottage was also smashed into pieces by the human-shaped object that descended from the sky. Then there was another boom sound. That human-shaped object smashed the thatched cottage and the bed. It didn't lose its strength and smashed a deep hole in the ground, finally ending the process of this collision. The tall and sturdy young man and the girl in white both opened their mouths in shock. Because of this sudden change, they were so shocked that they couldn't figure out what was going on. What was going on? How could this be? Just like that, he watched his own room and his own bed being smashed into pieces without any warning. This feeling was extremely strange. In the blink of an eye, there were only ruins in front of them. This was too. What did my room do to offend you? You just smashed it like that. The tall and sturdy young man strode forward and said, "What exactly is that human-shaped object? How could it be so domineering and actually destroy my room in one go?" He was also bold because of his skills. He didn't care about anything and just rushed in. The girl in white was worried that he would be hurt and hurriedly followed him in. The two of them came in front of the big hole. The place where their room used to be had now turned into a huge hole that was at least 3 feet deep. There was actually a person lying at the bottom. Chapter 1980. It seems like it's a person. This person's entire body seemed to have turned into charcoal. There were even wisps of smoke rising from some places. It was as if a corpse had been placed in a crematorium, but had escaped. It was a very strange feeling. It's a person, and he's still alive. The burly young man frowned. He couldn't help but gasp in amazement. This guy is really strong. He flew from such a far place and destroyed my house. He even smashed into the ground. His entire body is smoking and burning, but he's still alive. The girl in white asked curiously. He's not dead? The burly young man nodded slowly. There's still a heartbeat. He's still alive. He frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, he said, it seems that this guy must have provoked some big trouble. Do you think this person can be saved? If he can. The girl in white was very compassionate. Let me see. The burly young man agreed. Then, he jumped into the pit and carried the unconscious person out. He turned over and saw the face of the unconscious person. He couldn't help but be startled. Then, he was stunned. Then, he was shocked. He said tongue-tied, "Oh my God! How could it be him?" The burly young man recognized this person. Who are they? Him? The girl in white was puzzled. Who is he? Is he an acquaintance of ours? The burly young man didn't answer. He just carefully carried the person out. Then, he hurriedly gathered some withered grass and made a simple bed. Then, he put the person in his arms on it. Then, he took out a medicine bottle from his bosom. Then, he took out a pill and put it in the person's mouth. Then, he operated his martial arts. He helped the man dissolve the medicine and stabilized his heart meridians so that he would not lose his life. Then, he began to carefully treat the hundreds of wounds on the man's body. After busying himself for a while, he finally opened his mouth. Juan, you know this person as well. He is our old friend. He is someone who has helped us before, but he is also our enemy. The white-clothed girl looked at the unconscious and extremely weak face in front of her. She vaguely felt that she knew something. She said, "Is this person also from the Chongtian continent? Otherwise, how could he be an old friend?" "That's right." The burly young man looked at the person in front of him deeply. With a complicated accent, he said, "This person is the common boss of all my opponents, the master of Calamity's sword, Chu Yang." "Ah? It's him?" The white-clothed girl covered her mouth. It was no wonder that the white-clothed girl was shocked. Chu Yang, the Calamity Sword Master, was too famous in the Heavenly Layer continent. He was a legendary figure. It was just that at this very moment, this legendary figure had appeared in front of the two of them in such a sorry state. They truly felt that many legends had been shattered. "Isn't it him? He gave me the medicine. It was also him who saved my life. It was also him who gave me heavenly treasures to help me stabilize my foundation. It was also him. He was the one who gave us the medicine and allowed you to ascend with me." The burly young man's voice was filled with too many sighs. The moment he saw the person in front of him, he seemed to recall a lot of long-lost memories. Suddenly, another scene appeared in front of his eyes. But it was also because of him that my clan in the upper three heavens was destroyed. Except for me, no one else survived. It was also because of him that many clans in the upper three heavens, including the Li clan, were also destroyed. The burly young man smiled bitterly. "It's really a tangle of grievances." "Then, will you save him?" the white-clothed girl asked a little anxiously. "How can I not save him?" The burly young man smiled boldly. "I, Li Xiong too, want to defeat him. But I have to wait until he recovers from his injuries and have a proper battle." "How can I, Li Xiong too, take advantage of someone's perilous state and not save him. This burly young man was Li Xiong-tu, who appreciated Chu Yang in the heavenly layer continent, but also had grievances with him. As for the white-clothed girl, she was Li Xiong-tu's wife, Meng Huanhuan, who also came from the heavenly layer continent. The white-clothed girl, Meng Huanhuan, heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she became worried again. But looking at him, his enemy must be very powerful. With the strength of the two of us, I'm afraid. Li Xiong-tu snorted and said, "Even if the enemy is powerful, so what? Even if the enemy is the heavenly emperor of this world, so what? Can I, Li Xiong-tu, disregard gratitude and righteousness?" The white-clothed girl heaved a sigh of relief. "Xiong-tu, I knew that you're such an indomitable man." Li Xiong-tu laughed. "I believe that no one can deny this part. As people of the martial world, if someone respects me, I'll return the favor tenfold. If someone slashes me, I'll kill his entire family. Distinguishing between gratitude and grievances is the right way to be a man. If gratitude and grievances are entangled and cannot be distinguished clearly, then we should repay the kindness first, and avenge the grievances later." Speaking till here, he said, "Chu Yang's injuries are really not light. Huan, come and help me. Take out all my medicine for injuries. Also, take out all my treasures." He smiled bitterly. "Chu Yang is really good at scheming. Speaking of which, more than half of my treasures were given to me by him in the past. Now I'm going to use them on himself. Could it be that this guy had planned all this in the past? Why didn't I eat them all earlier? How regretful, how regretful." Meng Huanhuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You, who can calculate for such a long time? Stupid blockhead." Li Xiong-tu chuckled. Not long after, under the joint efforts of the husband and wife, all the wounds on Chu Yang's body were carefully treated. Moreover, they were all properly bandaged. If Li Xiong-tu were to treat these wounds, even if they could be treated in the end, Chu Yang would probably be wrapped up like a big rice dumpling. And it would definitely be the kind that was unsightly. But under the hands of Meng Huanhuan, every wound was taken care of and bandaged extremely carefully. At the same time, it was also extremely gentle. She would definitely not let Chu Yang suffer even the slightest bit of unnecessary pain. "This guy's vitality is still as tenacious as before." Li Xiong-tu sighed in amazement. "The bones all over his body are almost scattered, and the flesh on his body is almost roasted into charcoal. But he's still alive, and his vitality is still very strong. This is really an anomaly." Meng Huanhuan pursed her lips and smiled. The number of wounds on Chu Yang's body just now made Li Xiong-tu and Meng Huanhuan both surprised. There were more than 700 big and small wounds, almost 800 of them. From top to bottom, there was almost no place that was intact. Seeing such a dense distribution of wounds, Li Xiong-tu was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "You're indeed the legendary Tribulation Sword Master. With so many wounds, if it were me, I'm afraid I'd be dead already." Unexpectedly, a hoarse voice suddenly sounded. "Bearing these wounds all the time. It's really better to die like you. This is really not something that humans can bear. Li Xiong-tu, don't you think so?" Li Xiong-tu and Meng Huanhuan were both shocked. The person who spoke was actually Chu Yang. Li Xiong-tu had seen Chu Yang's injuries before. With such serious and terrifying injuries, he expected that Chu Yang would be able to open his eyes in 3 days and speak in 10 days. This was already considered very good. But he never expected that Chu Yang had already woken up. Not only could he speak, but he even recognized who he was. This was really too monstrous. He hurriedly turned back and saw that Chu Yang had already opened his eyes and was looking at him. There was a smile in his eyes. "Li Xiong-tu, you're really young. This is really like a dream. I really didn't expect that the first acquaintance I met in the Heaven Imperial Court was not my brothers, but you." Li Xiong-tu laughed. "You're indeed the legendary Tribulation Sword Master, the legend of the Heaven Imperial Court. With such serious injuries, you actually woke up so quickly and can still maintain your consciousness." As he said, he walked over and sat on the bed. The bed that was barely supported shook, which indirectly affected Chu Yang's wounds. Chu Yang grimaced. "Fuck! Do you know how to talk? Are you praising me or scolding me? You bastard, get up quickly. You're hurting me." Li Xiongtu laughed. Meng Huanhuan was carefully tending to the wounds on Chu Yang's body caused by Li Xiongtu's movements. She grumbled. "Xiongtu, you're too much. You could have just stood or sat on the floor. Why did you have to sit on the bed? You're deliberately making people uncomfortable." Li Xiongtu laughed. "The moment this bastard came, he smashed the room that I built painstakingly for half a day. If I don't take revenge on him, how can I live up to my hard work?" Meng Huanhuan was angry and amused at the same time. She had never seen Li Xiongtu, who was always like a block of wood, who was always mighty and domineering, actually have such a strange side. Even when they were in the Li clan, she had never seen Li Xiongtu so relaxed. But now, seeing Chu Yang, who was entangled with grievances, was different from his usual self. It seemed that this Chu Yang really had a lot of unusual aspects. Then, Meng Huanhuan discovered an unbelievable fact. Ever since Chu Yang woke up, the wounds on his body were actually healing at an extremely fast speed. Even those torn muscle tissues were healing by themselves little by little. Also, his body was brimming with an extremely strong and pure spiritual energy, which was aiding in the recovery. However, this kind of restoration was clearly different from the restoration he had seen before. In an extremely short period of time, Chu Yang's body had already recovered a lot. Meng Huanhuan naturally didn't know that this was a blessing from the heavens that Chu Yang had survived the heavenly punishment and was confirmed not to die. She also didn't know that Chu Yang's tribulation space was constantly cleansing the spiritual energy in his body. At this moment, seeing such a situation, she could only be shocked. "Brother Chu, who exactly is the other party? How can he make you so miserable?" Li Xiongtu asked. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. "Brotherly, there's something wrong with your words. I have to remind you." Chapter 1981. "Oh? What do you mean?" Li Xiongtu looked at him, puzzled. "This is from P. In this Heaven Imperial Court, both you and I are outsiders. This is not the Heaven Imperial Court. Our cultivation is more than enough to dominate the Chongtian continent, but in this place, we are basically nothing," Chu Yang said softly. "So here, I am no longer the Calamity Sword Master, and I am no longer a first-class expert. There are too many experts in this world. We must know our place. Otherwise, we will suffer a great loss," Chu Yang said softly, but seriously. Li Xiongtu was silent for a while, and said, "Thank you. I have learned something." Li Xiongtu's words were sincere, because he himself knew that his words just now had exposed his somewhat arrogant mentality. That sentence, "Who is it that can make you so embarrassed?" At first, it didn't sound like a big deal, but in fact, it already regarded Chu Yang as a top expert. If Chu Yang was already a top expert, what position did Li Xiongtu place himself in? This top expert's strength might even be measured by Chu Yang's level in the Heaven Imperial Court. If Li Xiongtu kept this attitude, as Chu Yang said, he would definitely suffer a great loss. Even suffering a great loss was an understatement. There was a risk of death at every turn. "You'd better not get involved in the enemy I'm facing this time. You don't even need to know." Chu Yang smiled. "When I'm a little better, I will leave immediately. Brotherly, I am already very grateful for your help this time." Li Xiongtu's face darkened. "Chu Yang, are you looking down on me?" Chu Yang smiled bitterly and said seriously, "Brotherly, we have known each other for a long time. We've known each other for quite some time. Have I ever looked down on you? However, the enemy this time is really too strong. Moreover, the other party's influence is also a little too big. If you rashly get involved, it will instead make me feel more apprehensive." Chu Yang's words were very straightforward. He even told Li Xiongtu directly that if he got involved, not only would he not be of help to him, but he would also be a burden. If he didn't add to the trouble, he would be of help. They had never been close friends, but Chu Yang understood Li Xiongtu's temperament very well. If he didn't get rid of Li Xiongtu's idea, Li Xiongtu would definitely not give up and would definitely get involved. That he was the one who had really harmed him. However, Li Xiongtu was so worried that he frowned. He said in a low voice, Chu Yang, did you provoke some of the top-ranked super sects in the Heaven Imperial Court this time? Chu Yang smiled bitterly. If it was only a super sect, I would have been more relaxed. At least I would have had the strength to deal with them. But the enemy I provoked this time is 10 times or even 100 times more terrifying than a super sect. Even this comparison is the most conservative estimate. Li Xiongtu sucked in a breath of cold air. Meng Huanhuan immediately covered her mouth. His face was filled with shock. After a long while, Li Xiongtu said cautiously, Could it be that you are, what I've provoked this time is the entire Mo Yuntian? Even the Lord of Mo Yuntian, Heavenly Emperor Mo Yuntian himself? Chu Yang said directly. Li Xiongtu rubbed his eyebrows with 2 fingers and smiled bitterly. I say, Chu Yang, no matter how audacious you are, this time, isn't this too big of a game? What did you do to make the entire Mo Yuntian hunt you down? Chu Yang grinned. Actually, I didn't do anything. I just killed the son of Heavenly Emperor Mo Yuntian, that's all. Li Xiongtu staggered and almost fell to the ground. He stabilized his body with difficulty, but he was already speechless. I have to admit, this enemy, I really can't handle it now. Li Xiongtu looked conflicted. Chu Yang almost laughed out loud. Isn't that so? I admit that I can't handle it either. Damn it. After listening to Chu Yang's explanation of the cause and effect, Li Xiongtu punched his own thigh and said angrily, Well done! Well done! Killing such a bastard was only right. Damn it, that Heavenly Emperor Mo Yuntian really doesn't know any better. Brother Chu's actions are clearly to help him clean up his family. He should be grateful to you, but he actually sent troops to kill him. This is simply repaying kindness with enmity. This is unreasonable. Chu Yang was flabbergasted. He stared at Li Xiongtu in a flabbergasted manner. He had been stunned by the words of this guy. What kind of person is this? I seem to have said it very clearly just now. It's me who killed his son. How can he be grateful to me, and even if I know that you're speaking for me, it doesn't make sense. The hatred of killing is irreconcilable. If he really wants to thank me for helping him clean up his family, would I dare to believe it? Of course not. Even if he really doesn't find trouble with me, I'll have to be on tenterhooks for the rest of my life. That feeling is probably more terrifying than him directly finding trouble with me like this. Being on tenterhooks for the rest of my life, just thinking about it is scary. Oh, am I crazy or is Li Xiongtu crazy? How did he come up with such words? As he spoke, Chu Yang acutely felt an endless numbness all over his body. This was a good sign. The appearance of this feeling meant that his wounds were about to heal. After waking up, Chu Yang didn't take any heavy pills to recover his body. This was because after every heavenly punishment, as long as he was still alive, he would be blessed by the heavens. And at this moment, the energy of the heavens and earth would be infused into his body, and he would be reborn. If he rashly used heavy pills, it would be a waste. Any waste now would be shameful, and the consequences would be severe. Just as Li Xiongtu was dumbfounded, he saw the many terrifying wounds on Chu Yang's chest healing bit by bit. Then, the wounds formed scabs, and the scabs fell off. Chu Yang's skin recovered as if he was never injured, and was as smooth as jade. At the same time, the whistling spiritual energy in Chu Yang's body was also stimulated. It gradually pushed forward, and then reconnected all the broken meridians. Like a tsunami, it rushed through his meridians at an extremely fast speed. Chu Yang could feel that his injuries were gradually recovering with each cycle. Moreover, his cultivation had also advanced by a step. With a thought, he opened up his inner vision. To his surprise, he found that his meridians were now as wide as the Yangtze River. The spiritual energy that flowed in his meridians was no longer in the form of mist like before. Instead, it had added a lot of faint golden colors. It came and went with a whistling sound, just like the endless waves on the sea, going back and forth in an endless cycle. Also, his dantian had obviously expanded as well. Another change was the primordial real silk in his dantian. Now, there was a big bundle in each of his dantians. Originally, Chu Yang could still count clearly. There was one more strand. Yes, there were 3 more strands. But now, he couldn't even count them. He was really pleasantly surprised. Even though the tribulation space was still quiet, the rich and pure spiritual energy was still flowing into his dantian. However, his dantian was now empty. Even though there was a huge amount of spiritual energy flowing into his dantian, it did not seem to be able to change anything. He no longer felt the sense of crisis of being filled to the brim, and was about to burst. Heavenly human level! Although it was only a beginner level. But after all, he had stepped into the heavenly human level. He could be considered to have officially stepped into the level of first-class experts. Chu Yang breathed a sigh of relief. He had finally crossed the threshold of the heavenly human level. On the path of cultivation, he had taken another big step forward. Chu Yang, what level have you reached in your current cultivation? Is it the earth level? Or was it even higher? You should be reaching the heaven level soon, right? Li Xiongtu asked Chu Yang as he roasted meat. Chu Yang had already changed out of his black clothes. He sat beside Li Xiongtu and watched him roast meat. Meng Huanhuan had gone to pick wild vegetables. It's okay. Slightly higher than the heaven level, Chu Yang replied. Higher than the heaven level? Do you already have the cultivation of a saint? How is that possible? You've only been here for a few days. Li Xiongtu really didn't dare to believe Chu Yang's words. No, I'm not a saint anymore. Oh, I know. Are you at the heaven level now? Or the higher level? Haha, my current cultivation is only 1 word higher than the heaven level. What is your cultivation level? Can you tell me directly? Well, okay, I should have just reached the heavenly human level. Just 1 word higher than the heaven level. Chu Zhang said casually. Hurry up and roast, I'm starving. Pa! Half a rabbit fell from Li Xiongtu's hand and fell into the fire with a bang. Damn, such good rabbit meat, how can you waste it like this? Chu Yang hurriedly scooped it out and said with heartache. But he didn't hear Li Xiongtu's response. Chu Yang turned his head and saw Li Xiongtu staring at him as if he had seen a ghost. Heavenly human level? Cough cough. Chu Yang realized that he had unintentionally acted a little pretentious, and it was the kind that deserved a beating. You. Are you still human? Li Xiongtu was so aggrieved that he wanted to die. I've been cultivating so hard, and even had such great opportunities, but I'm still only at the heaven stage. But you've already surpassed the heaven stage, saint stage, and reached the heaven stage? Is there such a thing as slightly higher, and just 1 word higher? Cough cough. Actually, I'm fine. I just had better opportunities. Chu Yang was speechless for a while and didn't dare to say anything more. If he had known that Li Xiongtu would be beaten so badly by him, he would have concealed a little more. Li Xiongtu was shocked for a while. Then, he came back to his senses and laughed. That's great. I have a new goal. He laughed heartily. I've been chasing you all this time, chasing Mo Tianji, Gu Du Xing Dong Wushang. But I never caught up. It's good that I didn't catch up. If I did, I'm afraid I'll slack off. I'll just let you all run in front. It's also a kind of fun for me to keep chasing. His voice was full of pride and there was no hint of disappointment at all. Chapter 1982. Good! This is the Li Xiongtu that I know. Chu Yang cheered from the bottom of his heart. After a meal, Chu Yang's overall condition had already recovered by more than 80%. Then, he took his leave. He was now in the center of a whirlpool of right and wrong. There was no need to burden others and himself. Before they parted, Li Xiongtu said thoughtfully, Chu Yang, I'm afraid that you've only managed to improve your current cultivation after going through a life-or-death situation, right? Chu Yang smiled faintly and patted his shoulder. I can. But for you, cultivation is not the most important thing. The most important thing is still the people around you. Don't neglect the people in front of you. Li Xiongtu was stunned. Then, he sweated profusely and said, Yes. Yes. I will pay attention. Chu Yang smiled slightly. Li Xiongtu did not request to fight against Mo Yutian together with Chu Yang. After knowing Chu Yang's current cultivation, Li Xiongtu did not mention it again. Because he knew that if he forcefully participated in this matter, it would really make things difficult for Chu Yang. With Chu Yang's current cultivation, I will only be a burden to him if I participate in this battle. That's all. Li Xiongtu was born with pride. He had never submitted to anyone. How could he be willing to become someone's burden? So, he did not say anything about this matter. He only made a decision in his heart. One day, I will definitely catch up to you. Surpass you. Seeing Chu Yang's figure disappear into the dense forest, Li Xiongtu did not speak for a long time. Xiongtu, Chu Yang left this. Meng Huanhuan walked over with 2 small bottles. Besides, there was also a letter from Chu Yang. Brother Li, this is a small token of my appreciation. You should save me, so I won't thank you. But it's also right for me to give you something. So, you don't have to be especially grateful to me. It's good that we both know. The things in those 2 bottles are for sister-in-law. It has nothing to do with you. It's also not a big deal. It's just a little bit of spring of life and a heavy pill. It can more or less improve sister-in-law's aptitude, so that she can roam the Heaven Imperial Court with you in the future. Otherwise, once a martial arts fanatic like you starts cultivating, wouldn't it be a pity to neglect a beauty like her? After we part today, we'll meet again someday. Wouldn't it be great if we could stand shoulder to shoulder at the peak of the world one day? I'll be waiting for you. If you're still so weak the next time we meet, I'll kick you to death. That's it. I have to leave quickly. If I leave early, I won't be able to hear you scolding me. After reading the letter, Li Xiongtu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The letter was written in plain language. This was the first time Li Xiongtu had seen something like this in his life. This was the brush of the legendary Calamity Sword Master. This was, a little too, when a legend appeared in front of your eyes. Oftentimes, knowing a person by his reputation was not as good as meeting him in person. This guy is really... Li Xiongtu laughed and stopped what he was about to say. He left. Let's go. He's already gone far. If I don't work harder, I won't be able to catch up. Meng Huanhuan gently nodded and followed behind him. Li Xiongtu strode out. He had just walked a few feet when he suddenly heard whooshing sounds. In an instant, countless people floated down from the sky and surrounded Li Xiongtu and Meng Huanhuan. Everyone was exuding an unusually powerful aura, as well as a domineering and fierce murderous aura. Their eyes looked around, as if they were searching for something. Li Xiongtu's heart skipped a beat. Chu Yang's letter turned into powder in his hand. He put his hands behind his back and the powder fell down, completely disappearing in the wind. No one noticed, or perhaps no one would have thought, that the powder that this guy dropped was the important clue that they were desperately trying to get. An old man stepped out of the crowd and sized up Li Xiongtu and Meng Huanhuan. Meng Huanhuan felt that the old man's eyes were extremely sharp and captivating. She couldn't help but feel afraid and subconsciously hid behind Li Xiongtu. Li Xiongtu's face showed anger. He stepped forward and asked coldly, "Who are you? Why are you blocking my and my wife's path for no reason?" The old man pondered for a while and said, "Sir, please don't be impatient. We have no choice but to stop the 2 of you. We want to ask you about the whereabouts of a person." The old man pulled with his hands. In the void, the air suddenly became dense and a picture scroll appeared. In the picture scroll, a black-clothed young man was looking ahead with an unruly gaze. He was holding a sword that shone with cold light. Even though it was only a portrait, it gave others the feeling as if it was a living person. The bearing and aura of this black-clothed young man were vividly portrayed, both in form and spirit, and they were lifelike. This black-clothed young man was Chu Yang. When this picture scroll appeared, Li Xiongtu and Meng Huanhuan both had a strange feeling. It was as if Chu Yang, who had just left, was standing in front of them again. This was a special ability that only saints had, void image. Not interested. Li Xiongtu didn't even lift his eyelids. He pulled Meng Huanhuan and strode forward. Please make way. Impudent! An ink cloud guard scolded sternly. Ignorant child, do you know who you are talking to? Li Xiongtu raised his head and looked at this ink cloud guard. He sneered and said, What does his identity have to do with me? Could it be that you are His Majesty Eastern Sovereign? If he is, I will immediately apologize to the Master of this heaven and tell him everything I know. The ink cloud guard was instantly dumbfounded. He didn't know what to say for a moment. This was the Eastern Royal Heaven. The crime of impersonating the Eastern Sovereign was an unforgivable felony no matter what position or reason. The ink cloud guard said after a while, Although my lord isn't His Majesty Eastern Sovereign, he is still. Li Xiongtu interrupted him again. Oh, may I ask which Empress June is your lord? Li Xiongtu has eyes but failed to recognize the Great One. I apologize here. Please bestow me a name. I will kowtow and apologize. The ink cloud guard was once again dumbfounded. This question was too standard. Although Meng Huiya's position was extremely high, it was far from being on the same level as First Empress June. At most, he was her subordinate. The ink cloud guard simply did not know how to respond. Li Xiongtu saw that the ink cloud guard didn't say anything. He turned to look at Meng Huiya and said coldly, Aren't you a descendant of Empress June? Could it be that you are His Majesty the Sage? Such grandeur, such a big lineup, you are really impressive. All the ink cloud guards and silver-armored soldiers who heard this felt a surge of anger rising from their chests and stomachs, but it was stuck in their throats. How dare this bastard say that? Meng Huiya was slightly embarrassed. He took a deep breath and said, You have misunderstood. How can I be compared to His Majesty the Sage? Such a big lineup, such an awe-inspiring presence. I really thought that you are the Heaven Imperial Court Sage. I almost peed in my pants just now. After all this time, it turns out that you aren't. If you aren't, you should have said so earlier. If you aren't, why are you pretending? Li Xiongtu said mockingly. Since you aren't, please make way. We, husband and wife, still have things to do. Although Li Xiongtu had a bold and domineering personality, which made people feel that he was taciturn at first glance, he was still an all-powerful figure in the upper three heavens after all. He had made many adventures in the martial world. Such sarcastic words, unless he didn't want to say them, would come out of his mouth without feeling embarrassed at all. In fact, people like him who spoke sarcastic words could really infuriate people to death. And these people in front of him were obviously the people who wanted to kill Chu Yang. Li Xiongtu was naturally unhappy. How could he show them a good face? You! A few ink cloud guards were about to flare up on the spot. Want to fight? Li Xiongtu laughed loudly and took 3 big steps forward. In the eyes of everyone, he was just a small ant with heaven's stage cultivation. But after these 3 steps, he seemed to have become a majestic and unshakable mountain. With heaven's stage cultivation, facing thousands of martial saints and heavenly men, he actually showed no fear. Looking at his posture, he didn't even have the slightest bit of hesitation. Meng Huiya sighed in his heart. Another genius. Why are the heavens so fond of the Eastern Royal Heavens? In the future, he will be another outstanding person. Such a strong heart, and such a strong fighting spirit. If he matures, although he is still far from being on par with Chu Yang, he will definitely not be inferior to the younger generation of the upper 3 heavens. Meng Huiya waved his hand and stopped everyone. Little brother, don't be angry. We don't have any bad intentions. We just want to ask you about this matter. We don't have any other intentions. Li Xiongtu said coldly. But we are really in a hurry, Meng Huiya said. But we just want to ask you to take a look. Little brother, see if you have seen it before. We won't take up much of your time. Li Xiongtu said reluctantly. All right. He looked at the picture. Meng Wuya's eyes immediately locked onto Li Xiongtu's eyes. In just a moment, Li Xiongtu retracted his gaze and said, I don't have any impression. This person is definitely not from our area. Meng Wuya nodded and suddenly asked Meng Huanhuan, May I ask if you have seen this person before? Meng Huanhuan leaned against Li Xiongtu and shook her head. I haven't seen him before. Meng Wuya frowned as he watched Li Xiongtu and Li Xiongtu walk further and further away. General, is there something wrong with this person? A general beside him asked. Meng Wuya didn't say anything and only sighed. Just now, Meng Wuya felt something strange from Li Xiongtu. Li Xiongtu's words, actions, expressions, and tone were all flawless. However, Meng Wuya could clearly feel that there was a strange aura from Li Xiongtu. This aura definitely had something to do with Chu Yang. This feeling was very strange. There was no reason for it. In a sense, it was even very nonsensical. Therefore, Meng Wuya didn't say anything. He was afraid that once he did, his subordinates would act rashly. To be honest, it wasn't that Meng Wuya didn't want to keep Li Xiongtu. However, if he acted rashly, the consequences could be very serious. Their every move was under the surveillance of the Eastern Royal Heaven. Chapter 1983. Meng Wuya didn't dare to break this taboo. Once he came into contact with it, it would definitely trigger the Eastern Royal Sky's military to take action. That was no joke. General, I think that Chu Yang is most likely dead. An Ink Cloud Guard commander stepped forward and said carefully, Although we didn't find Chu Yang's flesh and blood along the way, under that kind of tribulation lightning, what could have survived? Wouldn't it be reasonable for him to be reduced to ashes? Even if he has the strength of a peak heavenly being and cultivation of a half-step saint, facing that kind of tribulation lightning, he would definitely not be able to survive. Originally from P. the commander said. Meng Wuya lowered his head and pondered for a while. Then he said, That's right. Right now, I wish that he was already dead. But this matter needs a detailed conclusion. Because I keep feeling that he is still alive. He let out a long sigh and said, You must know that if an existence like Chu Yang survives and eventually grows up, what kind of disaster would that be? Speaking up to here, everyone nodded slowly with a heavy expression. They had personally experienced Chu Yang's destructive power. That was a demon, a scourge that brought disaster to people. Indeed, for a heaven-defying demon like Chu Yang, if he really grew up to be an expert capable of contending with a first-level heavenly emperor, then the entire Ink Cloud Sky's calamity would also come. The day of destruction would not be far away. Just snatching his wife, nothing much had happened, and he could slaughter the heavenly emperor and even send more than 200 experts to the netherworld together. Now, they had completely destroyed his foundation and killed almost all of his subordinates. It was not an exaggeration to say that they could not live under the same sky as him. Such a deep hatred, with Chu Yang's personality of seeking revenge for the smallest grievance. How could he let it go so easily? Lu Pu, bring a few people to check the Heaven Imperial Palace's life and death records. No matter what method you use, even if you kneel on the ground and beg, you must see Chu Yang's records. See if his portrait is still lit up. You must do it. Do you understand? Meng Wuya took a deep breath and said, This, sir. I'm afraid that the people of Eastern Royal Sky won't be so cooperative. Lu Pu was in a difficult position. Don't you understand what I'm saying? I don't care what method you use. Meng Wuya said indifferently. I just want to see the result I want. Yes. Lu Pu and the other two soared through the air. Hurry up and continue searching. Waiting for news from Rupp. If the portrait was really dark, they would have to search for another day and try their best to find some remains. If they couldn't find anything, then let's assume that Chu Yang is dead. Meng Wuya muttered to himself. He paced back and forth a few times. Then, he finally came to a decision. Yes. Send another 300 ink cloud guards to search for Chu Yang's subordinates. As for the rest of you, check everything within a radius of 3,500 miles. Even if we have to dig 3 feet into the ground, we have to confirm it. Meng Wuya's second order. Yes. 300 ink cloud guards, under the leadership of a commander, shot into the dark forest like black arrows. He continued his pursuit. Suddenly, he felt a burst of relaxation all over his body. It seems that I have temporarily shaken off the pursuers. Next, it was time to meet up with them. It was just that his mood had only been relaxed for a short while. Just then, he saw a dark mass of figures descending from the north. Fuck, why are they so fast? Are these people reincarnated from rabbits? Why are they chasing so relentlessly? Chu Yang's head was full of cold sweat. Fortunately, he had left early. Otherwise, if they found out that Li Xiongtu and his wife were with him, then, with Li Xiongtu's current cultivation, he would die if he bumped into them. He would be injured if he bumped into them. He would probably be bedridden for half a year if he brushed against them. It would be a situation where there was no chance of survival. That would really be a burden to his good friend. The heavens are still very kind to me. With his mind set, Chu Yang slipped away like a wisp of smoke. Quickly slip away. To find the clues they left behind, he still had to go back to the original spot. He didn't know if the traces they left behind could still be left behind under the heavenly lightning. Chu Yang had restrained the aura of his entire body. He had moved stealthily through the forest like a leopard cat. In fact, he had even restrained the power of his divine sense to the extreme. So much so that it didn't overflow outside of his body. He was relying entirely on his eyes, nose, and ears, the most primitive organs, to determine his direction in order to determine where he was going. He was very careful along the way. Fortunately, Mo Yuntian's men had already searched this place very carefully. Chu Yang returned to the place where he had endured the heavenly punishment without any mishap. As far as the eye could see, it was a scene of devastation. The ground was in a mess. Some branches even had strips of flesh scraped off. Under the cleansing of the heavy rain, they had already turned white. Chu Yang couldn't help but take in a breath of cold air. He couldn't help but think of the battle at that time. His whole back also broke out in cold sweat. Previously, when he was in the situation, all his thoughts were on how to make use of the heavenly punishment to get rid of as many people on Mo Yuntian's side as possible. He didn't have time to think about anything else. He had to admit that if the heavenly punishment hadn't suddenly come, he would have already become dregs. And it wasn't just him. It seemed that those 33 people who followed him also couldn't have been lucky enough to escape. Looking at the remnants of the big trees, and the flesh hanging in the corners that couldn't be found, Chu Yang sighed in his heart. You are enemies, but you still can't deny that you are all good men. Chu Yang crouched in a patch of grass and trees. He was somewhat silent. Whether it's the ink cloud guards or the silver-armored soldiers, you are all good men. Just that spirit of not fearing death, you are already worthy of the title of good men, good warriors. No matter who you are loyal to, no matter who can obtain your loyalty, they are all worthy of being proud. Have a safe journey. Chu Yang recalled the scene under the heavenly punishment. The scene was a mess. Some fled, some hid, and some fought desperately. But the screams that he heard were at most a roar before death. Not a single one of them had ever cried out in panic. This was a large troop with thousands of people. And not a single person showed any signs of panic. Perhaps they didn't have every intention, but they didn't show it until death. This kind of military quality was admirable. But why didn't such good men go and fight the heavenly demons? Chu Yang's body left this place like a fish, slowly feeling his way to the location of the last heavenly thunder. He couldn't find anything here. Even the mountain was gone. What else was there to find? Chu Yang looked at the place where he was struck by the heavenly thunder, the lake. He was dumbfounded and tongue-tied. What kind of situation is this? This is too awesome. I remember that there was no lake at that time. Now, Where did this come from? Who the fuck did such a good thing? A fucking mountain turned into a big lake. Where else am I going to find clues? Chu Yang was speechless. Chu Yang had no choice but to search the area bit by bit. Only when he was 500 miles away did Chu Yang discover a tree that had been blown down by the strong winds. Moreover, it had been completely moved away from its original position by the violent vibrations. It had been slashed askew by a saber, and had revealed a strange mark. It was like an eagle's claw grabbing a bird. It was inconspicuous at all. Chu Yang sighed. This was really courting death. Fuck, it deviated from its original position. If I want to find the direction, I can only move back to its original position. Then, I can see the direction. But there are still so many people chasing after me. Chu Yang had an idea. He took out the calamity sword and silently chopped off half of the tree. Only a 30 to 40 feet long trunk was left. After thinking for a while, he chopped off the roots as well. Then, he carried the trunk, which was large enough for 30 to 40 people to wrap their arms around it, and slowly looked for the original position of this big guy. Perhaps it was because his luck had improved after passing through the heavenly punishment. He didn't walk too far before he found the original hole by following the broken roots. He carefully straightened it. Looking at the mark on it, he murmured, "These guys are not stupid. They actually went back the way they came." After identifying the direction, Chu Yang flashed through the forest like a gust of wind. His black clothes disappeared without a trace. "I don't know if the Manor Lord is alive or dead now." Che Shichu was already 2,000 miles away. He sighed. This sentence and this topic had been said more than 1,000 times along the way. But no one dared to answer him. Everyone's face was extremely heavy. It was a kind of extreme respect and worship. Or it could be said worship. Regarding what Chu Yang had done at the last moment, these people didn't have any other feelings other than respect, gratitude, and shock. Facing Mo Yuntian's army, the Manor Lord stayed behind alone and launched the heavenly punishment. One man, one sword, against thousands of soldiers and horses. He would rather choose to perish together with the enemy to create a chance for them to escape. Back then, Chu Yang rushed out and stood on the top of the tree. His determination to challenge the world with his sword had already become an eternal classic in everyone's hearts, an immortal legend. At that moment, even Bai Yuqian, an old monster who had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, almost couldn't help but shed tears. Who would be willing to put themselves in a desperate situation for their subordinates? In this life, who would use their lives to protect me? How am I supposed to repay this friendship? Can I repay it? If I don't follow and cherish such a leader, then what's the meaning of my life? The Manor Lord really risked his life for us this time. Bai Yuqian sighed deeply. There was some shock in his eyes. This old man originally thought that even if I died, I wouldn't have any regrets. But this time, if this old man died like this, I would really feel sorry for the Manor Lord. Everyone nodded in agreement. Chapter 1984. All right, let's not say anything nice. As long as the Manor Lord comes back, I'll give the rest of my life to the Manor Lord. Bai Yuqian raised his head and closed his eyes. She recalled the time when her father had rushed into a mountain of swords to protect her when she was still young, only to throw her off the cliff. If he was thrown off the cliff, there was still a chance of survival. But if he stayed, he would definitely die. At that moment, his father's figure was forever fixed in Bai Yuqian's heart. How many tens of thousands of years had passed? Even though she had already killed all of her enemies, that crazy figure was still so clear in Bai Yuqian's heart. It did not fade at all, it was eternal and undying. But today, there was one more such figure. At the last moment, he stood on the top of the tree. At that moment, he faced thousands of soldiers with one sword, blocked death with his body, and was covered in thunder and lightning. This became another indelible mark in Bai Yuqian's heart. At that moment, he thought of his father. His father did not hesitate to protect him with his life. Bai Yuqian almost cried. Everyone fell silent and sighed. Their hearts were filled with worry for that one person. Cheishichu said what was on everyone's mind. If the Manor Lord survives, I will be loyal to him for the rest of my life. At this moment, a sinister voice said, Your Manor Lord has already turned into ashes. You're destined to have no hope in this life. You might as well become ghosts and follow your Manor Lord. Let's go on the road together. Along with the voice, numerous figures descended from the sky and surrounded the crowd. The people who suddenly appeared were all dressed in black. Their faces were as black as ink, and their bodies were overflowing with a cold aura. It was as if a group of ghosts had suddenly appeared in front of them. They were the Ink Cloud Guards. They were the 300 Ink Cloud Guards who came on Meng Wuya's orders to encircle the final target. Everyone's hearts. They sank in an instant. In terms of individual strength, they were absolutely not inferior to the enemy. In fact, they had an 80% chance of winning. However, they were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. They only had a total of 33 people. And the other side had 300 people. The difference in numbers between the two sides was almost 10 times. How could they fight such a battle with such a disparity in overall strength? Even if it was a fight between children. Under the same level of strength, 1 against 2 was already the limit. Moreover, it was a battle of life and death. Each of them had to face about 10 opponents, so how could they have any chance of survival? However, he was no match for him. Not going to fight anymore? If he gave up on resisting, he would only die faster. His opponent would definitely not show mercy just because he gave up on the battle. The two sides were already destined to be on opposite sides. Once they met, it was either the other side would die or die. There was no other possibility. Everyone chuckled bitterly. They stood up. Although they had bitter smiles on their faces, when they stood up, their chests were as straight as a pencil. The Manor Lord faced 1,000 soldiers alone. They can still fight, and they can even make the other party bleed. Why can't we fight 1 against 10? What a joke! You guys are finally here. I thought we'd have to wait a little longer. Bai Yu-chen smiled faintly. His smile was filled with confidence that came from the bottom of his heart. There was also a hint of indescribable mockery in his voice. Do you really think that you guys will win for sure? Ha! Bai Yu-chen, your words are like a fart. That Ink Cloud Guard commander laughed loudly. Don't tell me you think there's a savior coming to save you bastards? Ha ha! Bai Yu-chen laughed even louder than him. There are only unexpected things in this world, and nothing is impossible. Are you so sure that there won't be any savior coming to save us? The Ink Cloud Guard commander's pupils shrank, and he said indifferently. Is that so? I'd like to see what kind of savior will appear for all of you who have escaped the net. As he spoke, he waved his hand and shouted. Kill! Don't leave a single one alive! I only want heads to make up the numbers. The 300 Ink Cloud Guards shouted at the same time. The shadows of swords and sabers flickered. The entire forest seemed to have turned into a galaxy filled with killing intent under the illumination of the swords and sabers. Without another word, the group of Ink Cloud Guards immediately pounced forward. Fight! Bai Yu-chen looked up to the sky and roared. Villa Master Chu faced 1,000 soldiers alone and still won the battle and saved our lives. Today is the time for us to prove whether Villa Master Chu is worthy of following. What he can do, we can do too. Villa Master Chu is able to face the world alone without fear. Are we really that gutless? Bai Yu-chen's eyes were about to split open as he roared loudly. Are we so gutless? Everyone's blood seemed to have been stirred up by this sentence in an instant. Suddenly, everyone's blood surged, and it was as if their meridians were bulging out of their bodies at this moment. In an instant, they felt that even if their bodies would turn into flesh and blood and scatter into the sky in the next moment, they would not disgrace Villa Master Chu's arrogance. Kill! Everyone roared in unison, gritting their teeth as they charged forward. It was only the moment of contact, but the bloody light in the sky had already flown up along with the flesh and blood. Everyone who participated in the battle did not even know whether this was the blood of the enemy or their own. Was this the flesh of the enemy or their own flesh and blood? Just like that, it was thrown into the dark night and the sky. But in that instant, the flesh and blood that had been detached from the body and shot out in all directions proved one thing: the outcome and cruelty of this battle. Bai Yuchen laughed loudly. Come on! I've been waiting for this moment of life and death for far too long. What joy is there in life, and what bitterness is there in death? What harm is there in death to repay kindness and revenge? A cold voice sounded. Old Bai, it's a pity that it's still too early for you to be waiting for this moment. Because this battle is definitely not your battle to the death. This sudden voice caused everyone on the other side to be suddenly energized, and they all shouted at the same time, Villa Master! And the moment the ink cloud guards on this side heard this voice, all of them retreated in unison as if they had seen a ghost. The leader of the ink cloud guards cried out in horror. Chuyang? It's actually you? You're not dead? That cold voice said indifferently. Yes. Your ears are not bad, to actually be able to hear my voice. It's really a pity to waste such nimble ears. After I kill you later, I'll definitely use your ears to go with wine, drinking the enemy's blood to our heart's content, and feasting on the enemy's flesh. Isn't that delightful too? After the indifferent voice, a ghost-like black shadow appeared. It suddenly appeared on the battlefield. It was as if this figure had existed here since time immemorial. It was a man in black. His figure was tall, and his face was extremely cold. Only a trace of an equally cold smile hung on his lips. His eyes were piercingly cold and sharp. It made people clearly realize that even if everyone in the world were to be slaughtered in front of him, his expression would not change at all. Because, in this world, he was the ruler of this world. Everyone's life and death was in his hands. That ink cloud guard leader took 3 steps back in disbelief. He said loudly, Chuyang, you're really not dead? Chuyang, who was dressed in black, suddenly smiled in the dark forest. I just praise your ears, but I didn't expect your brain to be so idiotic. If your brain doesn't like it, then don't want it. Your heavenly emperor of the ink cloud heaven, Yuan Tianji, is not dead yet. How can I bear to die? His smile was originally very ordinary, but in the eyes of the ink cloud guards at this moment, it was no less than 10,000 ghosts coming out together and laughing malevolently at them together. Since all of you have come to die, I'll grant you your wish. I'll grant you your wish. All of you can stay here. Chuyang laughed loudly. I may not be able to deal with your army of thousands, but do you think I can't deal with 300 bastards like you? With a long roar, he recited, What harm is there in slaughtering this world with this sword of mine? A piercingly cold and majestic sword light seemed to appear out of thin air and rushed out. When Chuyang was at the peak of the martial saint level, there was already no difficulty in dealing with these enemies. Now that he had passed the heavenly punishment, his strength had increased by almost 10 times, so it was naturally easier for him to deal with them. Facing these enemies now, the moment he drew his sword, he could already feel that the opponents were full of flaws from head to toe. It was as if they were just waiting for him to slaughter. Complemented by the sharpness of the calamity sword, Chuyang descended from the sky like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Everyone, get into formation. Work together to fight against Chuyang. When that ink cloud guard leader's steel-like voice exploded in the air, Chuyang had already appeared in the sky above them with a cruel laugh. While the awe-inspiring sword light created a bloody storm, Chuyang smiled faintly and said, Even in this heavenly imperial court, I am still the Calamity Sword Master. Today, the legend continues, and the legend still exists. Sword light poured down like rain. Kill. Bai Yuchen and the rest were energized, and they counterattacked with all their might. Chu Ying's sudden arrival seemed to have increased everyone's battle power by 30% out of nowhere. The Ink Cloud Guard was still in a state of shock. How could they fight against these ferocious warriors whose battle intent was surging to the extreme? Bai Yuchen and the rest counterattacked with all their might under Chu Yang's awe-inspiring might, and it actually turned into a situation where they were outnumbered. In an instant, it was no longer an evenly matched battle, but a one-sided massacre. The profoundness of this moment was really indescribable. Just because of one person, one person's arrival, the entire situation was reversed. After a long, long time, Meng Huiya looked at the bloody scene in front of him and sighed deeply. In his hand, he was holding a life and death record. On the record, there was a picture of a young man looking at Meng Huiya with a mournful face. It was as if he had been raped 300 times. It was hard to imagine that such a heaven-defying monster would have such a sad side. The only thing that could be seen was that this person was still alive, that's all. But now, there was no meaning in obtaining this life and death record to investigate anymore. Because it was no longer of any use. In front of him, the scattered corpses of the Ink Cloud Guard had already used their lives to tell Meng Huiya everything and the reality. Chu Yang is not dead. Meng Huiya felt a sense of exhaustion in his heart. This kind of feeling had never appeared in his hundreds of thousands of years of military service. But now, at this moment, he truly felt that he was really powerless against this enemy in front of him. Although he still had 2,000 troops under him, and each of them was an expert, Meng Huiya no longer had any confidence. As a general, he was not afraid of failure. Continuous failure was the true nature of a general. Continuous failure was not scary. As long as he had the confidence to continue fighting, everything was possible. But when a general lost the confidence to fight, then there was nothing to talk about. When he saw these 300 corpses of the Ink Cloud Guard, Meng Huiya did not even give the order to pursue. There was no doubt that he had lost the confidence of a general. This was the first time in his life. Only Chu Yang can give his enemy such treatment. Meng Huiya looked at the corpses in front of him. It could be seen from all the corpses that they were all killed without any pain. Furthermore, all the bones and broken limbs were still in the position where they had been when they first landed. There was not the slightest movement. This proved that after killing these people, the enemy did not have the slightest intention of desecrating the corpses. And among them, there was also the enemy's flesh and blood. This proved that although the enemy had achieved a complete victory, it was not completely without paying a price. In such a tragic battle, even if the enemy had desecrated the corpses, or even destroyed the corpses to vent their anger, it was understandable and forgivable. But now, there was clearly no such action at the scene. Meng Huiya closed his eyes tiredly. Physically and mentally exhausted. Immediately send a message to the Lord Heavenly Emperor. Meng Huiya closed his eyes and shook his body. Suddenly he spat out a mouthful of blood, which dripped onto his chest. His soul was seriously injured by the calamity, and he had been forcibly suppressing the heavy internal injury. Finally, under the agitation of his emotions, he could no longer suppress it and completely burst out. Ignoring everyone's worried eyes, Meng Huiya waved his hand and said softly, Meng Huiya has failed to live up to heaven's grace. I am unable to deal with Chu Yang. 10,000 brothers are buried in the East Imperial land. Speaking till here, Meng Huiya paused painfully. After a long time, he said with difficulty, Request for reinforcements, Your Majesty. There are still more than 100 words, 10,000 words, but I really don't want to write anymore. I can only say that I am about to fucking die. Chapter 1985. In Meng Huiya's hundreds of thousands of years of life, he had experienced more than thousands of battles. But he had never bowed down to any enemy. But this time, he was truly powerless against Chu Yang. For the first time in his life, he had lost confidence in battle. He felt mentally and physically exhausted, unable to fight anymore. He didn't want to fight anymore. This was a kind of complete depression. Facing this opponent who was hundreds of thousands of years younger than him, who he had only seen as an ant at the beginning, Meng Huiya was completely helpless. If it was a one-on-one battle, Meng Huiya wouldn't be so depressed even if he couldn't win. But the real problem now was that he had brought 10,000 elite troops to capture Chu Yang. In front of 10,000 troops, Chu Yang's real fighting power was at most 300 to 400 people. Regardless of which aspect he was in, he had the absolute advantage, and even the absolute chance of victory. All of Chu Yang's reliance had been cut off one by one. He was only left with the final path of fighting to his death. Logically speaking, this was like raising a mountain to kill mosquitoes, or using a dragon-slaying knife to kill a chicken. But what was unexpected was that he had lost 80% of his troops against these 300 to 400 people, and still hadn't achieved the final victory. The other party had always been at a disadvantage, and had always been on the run. He had always had the upper hand and had always been the pursuer. But in the process of this pursuit, although the other party's men were also decreasing, the men on his side were also decreasing, and it was decreasing rapidly. Until now, this death pursuit had inexplicably become a classic battle that made Chu Yang famous. It also made this ant that he didn't care about at all. He broke through all the way and finally reached the heavenly man level. A heavenly punishment thunder tribulation due to the advancement became a super weapon to slaughter the ink cloud sky army. 8,000 brothers were buried in the eastern royal heaven. A whole 8,000 brothers. Every time he thought of this number, Meng Huiya's heart ached as if it was being twisted. When he saw Chu Yang slaughtering many ink cloud guards' corpses after the heavenly punishment, Meng Huiya suddenly understood one thing. Although Chu Yang had just broken through to the heavenly man level, but he already had the tyrannical ability to kill people above his level, and even fight alone. His fighting power couldn't be judged by normal standards. Moreover, he had an unparalleled divine weapon as support. Even an expert at the peak of celestial being level was no longer a match for Chu Yang. It was even difficult for him to withstand the might of his sword. If I want to capture and kill Chu Yang with my current military strength, I'll have to do it myself. But I might be able to rely on my superiority over Chu Yang if I'm in a perfect state. Fight and win. It was a pity. This could only be a thought. Because he was seriously injured now, he couldn't fight at all. As for when he recovered, Chu Yang's divine soul should have recovered by now. He might not even need to recover by himself. Perhaps the divine soul of the calamity had already recovered first. After all, the divine soul of a calamity was the life form that was least afraid of being injured, and its recovery speed was definitely faster than his own. Not to mention, it also had the strength of a saint. No matter how one looked at it, it was superior to him. If something went wrong, the divine soul of the calamity would recover first. Together with Chu Yang, Mo Yintian's side would be in danger of being completely wiped out. But if he didn't do anything, his subordinates could only wait to be killed when facing Chu Yang. After thinking about it, although his overall strength was still more than 10 times stronger than Chu Yang's, he had no way to deal with this guy at all. He even had to think about how to prevent this scourge from nibbling away at them. In order to avoid any potential danger, no matter how unwilling he was, he could only ask for help from the heavens. After asking for reinforcements, Meng Huiya sighed deeply. He knew that he had no choice but to do it, but he still lamented his fate this time. The generals beside Meng Huiya were all filled with grief and indignation. Their faces were all red. "General, don't! We can still fight again. We still have enough manpower to turn the situation around. We can still fight. Even if we have to risk our lives, we must capture Chu Yang and bring him to justice. General! We can't give up like this." Everyone knew what this request for reinforcements meant to Meng Huiya. This was tantamount to the biggest stain in Meng Huiya's life, and there was no way to wash it away. "All of you, shut up!" Meng Huiya scolded in a low voice, but then he turned around. He said sadly, "Just do as I say. This is an order." Everyone was dumbstruck when they heard this. The entire room was silent. A few generals' tears rolled down their cheeks and finally trickled down their cheeks. All their pride, all their persistence, all their tenacity, all their faith, were shattered at this moment. The request for reinforcements was finally sent out. Everyone was like clay sculptures, standing there in a daze. The originally domineering fighting spirit seemed to have been sucked away. All of his energy seemed to have disappeared along with his pride. "General, what should we do next?" The staff officer looked like he was about to cry as he asked in a hoarse voice. "Continue to chase." Meng Huiya sighed deeply. "No matter what, we can't lose the target. Even if we don't have the ability to catch Chu Yang now, we still have to keep an eye on him. If we completely give up here, how do you expect the later generations to find his whereabouts? Won't we have to put in more effort? We can't do much for this mission, but we still have to do our best. Yes. Meng Wuya's words expressed his helplessness. It also showed that he really didn't have the slightest bit of confidence in facing Chu Yang now. Even if we don't have the ability to catch Chu Yang now. Even though the enemy was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of strength, they had been able to wear down, cripple, and even cripple the 10,000 elite soldiers who were at least at the saint level. This fact made Meng Wuya feel a kind of pain that was worse than death. Manor Lord, what should we do now? Where should we go? Should we still proceed according to the original plan? After the last battle, everyone on Chu Yang's side was wounded, but everyone was in high spirits, as if they had been reborn. The moment Chu Yang returned, all the difficulties and hardships seemed to have drifted away, vanishing without a trace. A strong and powerful backer was by their side. What else could be more worthy of relying on than this? With him around, we have nothing to fear. We don't have to fear the heavens, the earth, or anything in this world. Let's go south. Chu Yang smiled gently and said, "The following journey will be much easier. However, we can't let down our guard. After all, we're not facing Meng Wuya alone, or an army, but the entire Mo Yuntian. They definitely won't let this go." Yes. Bai Yuchen frowned and said, "Although we also have a breakthrough, the strength of the entire Mo Yuntian is still not something we can fight head-on. Although this wave of pursuit was fruitless, if there's another wave, I'm afraid the situation will be even more dangerous." Chu Yang nodded slightly, his expression solemn, as if he was thinking about something. After a short rest, we'll continue our journey. Finally, Chu Yang suppressed the thoughts in his heart and waved his hand to give the order. Now that all the forces were on his side, it was naturally best not to take risks. Yes. Chu Yang just casually gave an order, but everyone stood up sternly and stood upright to accept the order. It could be said that Chu Yang's journey went smoothly for the next few days. He could sense that Meng Wuya's team was still chasing after him. They were still wantonly searching for him. However, there was a huge difference compared to a few days ago. This was a very obvious phenomenon. In the past few days, there would be at least a few encounters in a day. More often than not, there would be more than 10 encounters. There were continuous battles, all without a break. But these few days, there wasn't even a single encounter. There were even 2 times when Meng Wuya's troops clearly discovered the traces of Chu Yang and the others, but they didn't chase after them to fight. Instead, they let them go lightly. This situation seems a little wrong. Che Shuchu and Bai Yuchen found Chu Yang to discuss. Indeed, something is wrong. Chu Yang frowned. For a moment, he also had some thoughts that he couldn't understand. He pondered for a long time. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and a thought that he definitely shouldn't have thought of surfaced. Could it be what? Chu Yang didn't say clearly. But on that night, Chu Yang led the troops to turn around and kill. Leading the remaining 33 people, they rushed into the camp of Meng Wuya's Ink Cloud guards like a sharp knife. They killed a lot of people, and then retreated calmly. The Ink Cloud guard had always held the upper hand, and had maintained the advantage all this while. In their hearts, even though they had suffered many losses, the advantage and disadvantage between them had never changed. Therefore, they had never thought that Chu Yang would actually dare to counterattack under such circumstances, and even take the initiative to kill them. This bludgeon hit was so solid that it was definitely not fake. When Meng Wuya and the others at the back heard the news and rushed over, they only saw a ground full of bright red corpses. More than 100 Ink Cloud guards were all killed by Chu Yang's surprise attack this time. "How dare you! You've really gone too far!" Meng Wuya was so angry that his hair stood on end. He couldn't wait to catch Chu Yang and cut him into pieces. Meng Wuya knew that Chu Yang would never suffer a loss, and that he would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. But Meng Wuya never thought that Chu Yang would seek revenge for the smallest grievance to this extent. I only let him take a few breaths, that's all. Chu Yang, you should have cherished such a rare moment of relaxation. You should have adjusted yourself a little. You should have enjoyed a rare moment of peace with each other. You should have lived in peace with each other. Chapter 1986. However, Meng Wuye did not have any effective way to deal with this situation. Everyone, gather! Meng Wuye had no other choice but to give such an order under the circumstances. Facing the lonely night sky, Meng Wuye's heart was filled with inexplicable emotions. He was very clear that Chu Yang's brazen counterattack meant that this scourge had completely matured. From now on, Mo Yutian would welcome an extremely powerful and terrifying enemy. Do you feel anything? Chu Yang sat on a tree stump and looked at Che Shichu and the others in front of him. This time, the scope of the discussion was very large. Everyone participated in the discussion. The atmosphere was very relaxed. After being suppressed for so long, there was finally a beautiful counterattack. The complete victory was no doubt very satisfying. The sullenness of these days was finally vented. The situation is really a bit unusual. Our surprise attack today was certainly unexpected, but the opponent's resistance is too weak. It is completely different from the enemies we encountered before. Bai Yuchen smiled faintly. Their courage to fight at all costs seems to have completely disappeared. Even their fighting instincts seem to be very passive. It is as if they are just passively dealing with it. There is no feeling of being intimidating and unshakable like in the past. Yes, I also have a similar feeling. They are like tigers without fangs. Although they still look ferocious, their bones have lost that kind of. Che Shichu pondered for a long time before continuing. It should be the courage that comes from the bottom of their hearts. Anyway, it is more or less like that. Yes, I also have the same feeling. It is far less difficult to deal with them than before. Although their strength is roughly the same, without momentum, there is nothing to be afraid of. There is no threat at all. Yes, although the battle this time is still intense, I don't feel the imminent danger of life and death like I did in the past. I also have the same feeling. Everyone was talking at the same time, discussing animatedly. Chu Yan had been listening all this time. Finally, he said softly, according to my guess, based on the current situation, we can basically conclude that Meng Wuye has given up on this chase. Given up? How is that possible? It can't be. Everyone was shocked. Meng Wuye was seriously injured due to a strange encounter. So, he won't be able to fight personally for a short period of time. As long as we don't force him into a dead end, Meng Wuye won't risk his life. But as long as he doesn't make a move, no one on their side is a match for me. Other than saint-level experts, no one is my match, Chu Yang said lightly. Although his tone was light, there was a kind of arrogance in his words that looked down on the world. Other than saint-level experts, no one is a match for me. What kind of confidence was this? Everyone who heard these words felt their hearts tremble. Perhaps they were the ones who had truly witnessed Chu Yang's growth. Back then, when Chu Yang charged into Mo Yuntian's camp with his sword and killed Yuan Shutu with his sword, he was only a small heaven-level martial artist. But after that, under extreme pressure, Chu Yang gradually broke through to the saint level, the peak of the saint level, and even broke through to the heavenly being level in a life-or-death situation. Or it should be said like this. It was under the pressure of Mo Yuntian's coercion that created this peerless expert who swept through the 8 wastelands and dominated the world. I am invincible below the saints. Just 3 or 4 months ago, perhaps there would not be any high-level people who would pay attention to Chu Yang. But now, in this world, who would dare to ignore Chu Yang's existence? So, the reason why they are chasing us now is just to confirm our direction, but they will not take the initiative to kill us. Because rushing forward is equivalent to courting death. They have already lost the ability to take the initiative to provoke us. Now, the real comparison of strength has been reversed. With Meng Wuye's character, he will never allow his subordinates to die in vain. So, they should be following us now, and not losing track of us, and then waiting for reinforcements to arrive. This is their current standard of action, Chu Yang said softly, and as he spoke, he was deep in thought. Who would have thought that we would finally beat that old bastard Meng Wuye into submission? For the past tens of thousands of years, I have never heard of that old bastard being beaten into submission. But Manor Lord actually made him eat his fill, haha. One of the experts laughed happily. Everyone was overjoyed. As long as they thought of Meng Wuye's current sullen and embarrassing state, everyone felt great in their hearts. I can't believe that bastard would have such a day, ha ha ha, that's right. I really want to see Meng Wuye's face with my own eyes, it will definitely be very interesting. Bai Yuchen was also laughing, but his face clearly showed that he was deep in thought. After a long while, Chu Yang raised his hand, and the clamorous voices of the crowd came to an abrupt end. We have certainly vented our anger, but although Meng Wuye is not moving forward, it shows that our future path will be even more difficult. This can already be foreseen, Chu Yang slowly said, and Bai Yuchen slowly nodded. This point, not only did Chu Yang think of it, he also thought of it, but he did not directly say it. Rather, if Chu Yang said it, it would create more of Chu Yang's authority. Bai Yuchen felt that he should speak less, unless Chu Yang left something out, and then he would fill in the gaps. But looking at the current situation, would Chu Yang leave anything out? Bai Yuchen smiled bitterly. If such a meticulous person, who cares about the world in his heart, could also leave something out, then it would really be a joke. Although the current situation has changed, we still need to take another step. We must completely break away from Meng Wuye's pursuers. If we can't break away from them, once their reinforcements arrive, with them as the guiding light, we will be swallowed up in an instant, so… Chu Yang stood up and slowly paced around. He had only walked around once, but Bai Yuchen and the others all knew that he had already made a decision. Because Chu Yang's biting cold killing intent was becoming stronger and stronger. Everyone clearly understood. Chu Yang wanted to. If they don't come, then can't we go? The initiative is in our hands right now. Chu Yang gave a strange smile, and then fiercely said, Pass down my orders, immediately conserve your energy, rest as much as possible, and ensure that your battle strength is at its peak. From now on, every night will belong to us. Good! Everyone loudly cheered. They all rubbed their fists, eager to give it a try. In the early morning of the same day, when the eastern sky was about to turn white, Chu Yang led his people to attack Meng Wuye's camp once again. Chu Yang's request was very simple. Everyone only needed to make one move with all their strength. One move to retreat. It didn't matter if the move was successful or not. Like a whirlwind, a mountain of knives and a forest of swords whizzed out. Then, they immediately retreated. Disappeared without a trace. Meng Wuye's army had only just reacted, but everything had already passed, and they couldn't catch up. Only a dozen corpses were left on the battlefield. Meng Wuye gritted his teeth, and they made cracking sounds. Their initial admiration and respect for Chu Yang had now turned into boundless hatred. This bastard, this scourge, this damn thing, he really knows how to read the wind and steer according to the wind. I just made a decision on my side, and he actually seized the opportunity to turn from passive to active, turning from defense to offense, and ambushing us twice in one night. However, he couldn't let Chu Yang and his people out of his sight, and could only passively chase after them. Along the way, both sides' positions were still the same, but the situation had undergone a strange and earth-shaking change. The original situation was that Meng Wuye and his people were chasing after Chu Yang, and they were on the verge of annihilating the enemy at any time. However, after that night, the situation had become very delicate. On the surface, the situation was the same as before. Chu Yang and his people were still running away. Meng Wuye was still chasing after them. But the real situation? Every time, the first to launch an attack was no longer Mo Yuntian's people, but Chu Yang's people. They were like a pack of leopards that were being chased, and who knows when they would turn around and take a vicious bite. Just one bite, but it was so painful that it penetrated the heart and lungs. As the days passed, as long as it was night time, Mo Yuntian's army would be even more vigilant, as if they were facing a great enemy. But even with such vigilance, they still couldn't avoid being attacked by Chu Yang's people. In such a continuous 7 to 8 days of rushing, Chu Yang's side launched a total of 30 attacks. Every time, there would be some gains, more or less. Of course, Chu Yang's side didn't have no losses at all. In these 30 over-attacks, they still lost one person. The reason was very simple: he didn't listen to orders, and was greedy for merit, and was surrounded by the enemy. The losses on Mo Yuntian's side were slightly more, and they were counted in the hundreds. After 7 to 8 days, there were only 1,000 people left in the army of 2,200. Towards such a result, the people on Mo Yuntian's side almost ground their teeth to pieces, and their eyes turned red. The grievances and depression in their hearts were simply monstrous. But now that the situation was not as good as the enemy, they could only suffer losses. In these 7 to 8 days, more than tens of thousands of miles had passed under their feet, and hundreds of Mo Yuntian's warriors fell under Chu Yang's sneak attacks. Chu Yang seemed to be addicted to sneak attacks, and his attacks were endless. Completely no one could accurately predict the timing of Chu Yang's next sneak attack. He came like a whirlwind, and left like a whirlwind, as if he came at will, and left in an instant. All the people on Mo Yuntian's side were mentally and physically exhausted. When they reached the river, there were only 1,000 people left under Meng Wuya, the last 1,000 people. And they could only follow from afar, and didn't dare to get as close as before. These 1,000 people who were lucky enough to survive were all so skinny that they were out of shape. Their eye sockets were deeply sunken into their eye sockets, and their faces were green and black, without any color. Chapter 1987. After Chu Yang and the others had arrived at the Fog River, they had immediately collected all the ferries in the vicinity. They had only chosen one big boat for the purpose of crossing the river. King of Hell Chu had spent a lot of purple cloud coins to buy all the other boats. Then, he set fire to all the ships. 33 people, including Chu Yang, boarded the ship in an orderly manner when the fire soared to the sky. Then, they set sail and left. The moment the boat left the shore, Chu Yang stood on the mast and said loudly, "Old General Meng, I have troubled you to send us off. Chu Yang will remember this kindness in my heart. I will definitely repay you in the future. The mountains are high and the rivers are long. Old General Meng, everyone, we will meet again." The wind whimpered. That big boat slowly entered the boundary of the Mist River under the eyes of Meng Wuya and the others. The dense fog that covered the sky and covered the earth only lasted for an instant before it completely covered the ship. Nothing could be seen. "After crossing this river, it will be the Demon Emperor Heaven. It will no longer belong to the Eastern Royal Heaven." Chu Yang looked at the fog and muttered to himself. Demon Emperor Heaven. That was a mysterious place. In addition to the vast territory, it was also full of mystery. After this, it would be equivalent to having half of the pursuers behind him. Even if Mo Yuntian had reinforcements, they would only be able to slowly search for him. However, the next time they meet, he would have to engage in a life-and-death battle with Mo Yuntian's men in the Demon Emperor sky. Chu Yang took a deep breath. Hide. It was definitely impossible to hide. The people he brought were all on the Mo Yuntian list. Sooner or later, they would be found out. Heavenly Emperor Ink Cloud sending Meng Wuya and the rest over this time, although it could already be considered to be heavily pressuring the border, with the current result, they still underestimated Chu Yang's tenacity. So, once Mo Yuntian sent out troops again, he would not make the same mistake. At that time, there would be thunder, mountains, and heaven and earth collapsing. Chu Yang knew that the temporary relaxation was just like the temporary calm before the storm. Although his expression was calm and indifferent, he did not dare to be careless in the slightest. "We've finally left the Eastern Royal Heavens." Chu Yang couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the dense fog. The Eastern Royal Immortal Realms was the place where he first came to the celestial world. There were simply too many things that happened here, too many memories that were hard to forget. Although he was reluctant to part with her, he did not regret it. Bai Yuchen stood beside him. Her sleeve that was missing an arm fluttered in the wind. She couldn't help but sigh emotionally as she said, "That's right. We've finally left the Eastern Royal Heaven." Chu Yang was startled. Then, he shook his head and laughed. In the hearts of Bai Yuchen and the others, the Eastern Royal Sky was simply a nightmare. All of his misfortune had started here. Now that he had left, of course he would be in a good mood. However, Bai Yuchen didn't know the true meaning behind Chu Yang's words. "Dongwang Heaven, I actually wanted to leave long ago." Chu Yang looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. His heart surged. "The Eastern Royal Heaven is too safe for me. Moreover, I have too much backing. If I don't leave the Eastern Royal Heaven, I, Chu Yang, will never be able to grow into a hero. Although the pursuit this time was filled with danger and death, I know that the Eastern Royal Heaven officials are helping me. They are sparing no effort in helping me. If I really meet with a life and death situation, I'm afraid that Shui Leihan will personally take action. What I'm afraid of is not sacrifice or death. What I'm afraid of is backing. Especially when it's a limitless backing." Chu Yang mocked himself. "With a backing, it's inevitable that I lack the will to improve. Therefore, I have to leave. I have to leave. Coming to the Demon Emperor Heaven, I have no one to rely on. The Eastern Royal Heaven's forces are also too far away to help. I'm the only one here. With my current group, I will continue to roam the world," Chu Yang said indifferently. "Although being in the Demon Emperor Heaven means that I'll have to face worse situations than before, I have no other choice. I'll gladly endure it." Regardless of whether it was the heart of an expert, the soul of battle, or the path to the peak, they all had no other choice. "Yes, we have no other choice," Bai Yuchen said with deep emotions. Just now, when Chu Yang was muttering to himself, he heard the last two sentences. "If we don't rise in battle, we will perish in battle," Che Shichu said quietly. Everyone stood on the ship and looked at the fog in front of them, as well as the completely unpredictable path ahead. They felt the ship slowly move forward, and no one said a word. It was completely silent. The future was vast, just like the fog that covered the sky. Only by sprinting in one direction and not turning back would they be able to walk out. If they hesitated, they would only walk in circles on the same spot. Then, they would be lost and die. The ship moved forward quietly. The wind and waves were quiet. "After leaving this fog river, we will be in the Demon Emperor Heaven." Meng Huiya looked at the fog in front of him and said indifferently, "Immediately send a message back. Say that Chu Yang has led 32 subordinates and entered the fog river. Their destination should be the Demon Emperor Heaven." "Yes. Go to further places to look for ships. We also have to cross the river at the fastest speed. Do everything possible to keep their tracks." "Yes." Above a patch of fog, on the north bank of the fog river, in a patch of fog, Yen Russian's expression was melancholy. He muttered, "Brother, the future is long. We will meet again someday. You must take care of yourself. It's my incompetence. I can't protect you." Yen Russian sighed sadly. "I hope that when you come back again, it will be the day when the king returns. As your brother, I will be honored." Yen Russian looked deeply at the fog in front of him and said quietly, "Brother, take care." This pursuit, when both parties had not given up yet, seemed to have already ended prematurely. But this pursuit that had a start but no end virtually shook the entire Heaven Imperial Court. There was a person who killed Heavenly Emperor Ink Cloud's youngest son. This person was called Chu Yang. Not only did he kill Heavenly Emperor Ink Cloud's son, he also killed more than 200 first-rate experts of the Ghost region in that battle. Heavenly Emperor Ink Cloud was enraged and sent out Wind Thunder General Meng Huiya to lead an army of 10,000 to pursue and kill Chu Yang. Along the way, they fought for 80,000 miles from beginning to end. Chu Yang used incomparable wisdom to escape all the way, counterattacking all the way, and even used all kinds of methods to deal with the enemy. In the continuous battle with the enemy, he accumulated breakthroughs all the way, and finally climbed to the Heaven Realm level. The Chu Yang, whose strength improved greatly, counterattacked sharply, killing Mo Yuntian's army until they were in disarray. 10,000 great army, 1,000 people were buried in eastern royal heaven forever. Finally, Chu Yang led his subordinates and successfully shook off Meng Wuya's pursuing troops, entering the Fog River. Entered the Demon Emperor Heaven's boundary. This news spread throughout the entire Heaven Imperial Court rapidly like a gale. All the people who heard this news felt like they were listening to a fairy tale. How can there be such a fierce person in this world? Me, this is really a living idol. Especially after the various major sects returned with resentment, this kind of rumor with obvious prejudice became more and more popular the more it spread. It gradually developed to the extent where it was universally praised. In the rumor, Chu Yang was the embodiment of justice, not fearing power, not fearing evil forces, and fought vigorously. On the other hand, Mo Yuntian and Meng Wuya had become indiscriminately evil bastards. Although this was the truth, but the rumors smeared Mo Yuntian's name a little too much. Especially General Meng Wuya, who was directly written as a snobbish villain who would not rise early without benefits. The original intention of this operation also became to bootlick the Sky Emperor, to get the chance to send troops this time by flattering him wantonly. But unexpectedly, the bootlicker hit the horse's leg, and sat on the hard stubble, piercing his chrysanthemum red and so on. As for Yuan Tianji, he was without tolerance, biased, unable to distinguish right from wrong, obstinate and self-opinionated. All in all, it was as unpleasant as it could be. The entire Heaven Imperial Court had been quiet for tens of thousands of years, and it seemed that it had been quiet for too long. This time, it finally completely exploded. Especially when these rumors were pushed vigorously by a mastermind behind the scenes, and the situation became more and more intense. Although the various major sects knew that they could not afford to provoke Mo Yuntian, it was still very good to use this kind of method to disgust Mo Yuntian and vent their anger. The entire Heaven Imperial Court was discussing this matter. Most people's gazes were cast towards Demon Emperor Heaven, where the target was located. They were looking forward to the news of Chu Yang's battle with Mo Yuntian to continue to spread, so as to satisfy everyone's gossipy heart. Of course, to a large extent, it was also to vent their anger. This time, Mo Yuntian had offended all the super sects completely. Only the extreme heaven's reaction was somewhat indifferent. Other than the Earth's Heart Pavilion's clear statement, and completely mocking Mo Yuntian, the number one Heavenly Sword Alliance was silent. Chu Yang's rise is already unstoppable, but we cannot add fuel to the fire. When necessary, under the premise that it does not harm our interests, we must give Mo Yuntian a certain amount of assistance. Yuntian's words set the tone. In my opinion, Chu Yang is much more dangerous than Mo Yuntian. At the same time, in various parts of the Heaven Imperial Court, the commotion caused by this news was completely different. Dreamlike veranda. Mo Qingwu sat anxiously in front of a group of little fellows, chattering away endlessly. You are from the Heavenly Armament Pavilion? Your big brother is called Chu Yang. Isn't your big brother the Chu Yang who is dressed in black, has big eyes, and is especially handsome and charming? Oh right, when he smiles, does he frown first before smiling? Is he? A series of hundreds of questions like this made the group of little fellows dizzy. They were completely at a loss. Originally, they thought that this number one genius of the sect had come, and she was so beautiful, so everyone was a little flattered. But after answering these questions continuously for a few days, and every question had to be answered several times, the little fellows were instantly dazed. Fuck, how many times have you asked? Aren't you annoying? Is this still the number one genius of this sect? What kind of brain, what kind of memory, what kind of intelligence? Chapter 1988. I wanted to say something, but I suddenly didn't know where to start. Right now I'm smiling. Yes, you're not mistaken, I'm smiling. And it's a proud and calm smile. This month's competition was different from the past. In the past, the pressure was less because no matter what, there were always times when I was in the lead. But this month, I kept falling behind. I kept falling behind until now. The pressure was getting bigger and bigger every day. I carried on like this. On one hand, I had to fight for the monthly votes and honor. On the other hand, I was fighting with myself every day. Can I still hold on? Can I still hold on? I'm already so far behind, but what I'm proud of is that I'm the winner in my own battle. Although this month was difficult, I endured it day by day. Yes, endure. Every day was a torment. That kind of pressure, I don't know if you can understand. Today, I said to myself, I'm only 1,500 votes away, there's still a chance. Let's write. Tomorrow, I said to myself, I'm only 1,700 votes away, there's still a chance. Let's write. Then, slowly, I said to myself, I'm only 3,000 votes away, there's still a chance. Tonight, I looked at the monthly votes list and said to myself, I'm only, almost 5,000 votes away. This kind of pressure is getting bigger and bigger every day. I'm proud that I didn't break down. At the beginning of the month, I said that I would go all out this month. I think I did it. Because tomorrow, I'll go all out again. Maybe I won't win against my opponent, but I've already won against myself more than 20 times. This battle, I have no regrets. I'll remember this month. Because this month, the pressure on me is unparalleled. At any time in the future, I'll be proud that I endured it. Every day, after writing a new chapter, I feel like I'm about to collapse. On one hand, it's tiring. On the other hand, it's even more tiring to withstand the pressure from myself. But I didn't collapse, did I? Shouldn't I be proud? There are only 27 hours left in this month. What should I do? Beg for monthly votes. Fight. Fight until the last moment. Stand out. Where are you now? At the last moment, charge with me. What lies ahead is perhaps a fixed failure. Are you willing to accompany me? Cast your monthly votes. Let this world be shaken again. For our stand out. The last stand. Pride to be with us. We are the stand out. Stand up. Fight. Who cares about victory or defeat? Chapter 1989. Mo Qingwu snorted and said, Humph, I am your big brother Chu Yang's wife. What's wrong with asking around? What? Nonsense. Absolutely not. You're not. It's definitely not yours. The group of little fellows immediately clamored. There was a wave of opposition, as well as a kind of disappointment and jealousy that the most precious thing has been snatched away. Mo Qingwu didn't care. Instead, she was proud. She took out her Qingwu Dream Saber and said, Look at this is a gift from your big brother Chu Yang. It's a treasure that only I have. Look at this, it's also a gift from him. And this. She thought to herself, You bunch of little girls, how old are you to be jealous of me? Looks like Chu Yang is really a playboy. He won't even let go of such young girls. Could it be that he's really 8 to 80 years old? Bah, what am I thinking? Forget it, when I see him, I must teach him a lesson. This is He Tian's injustice. As for Chu Yang being hunted down, although Mo Qingwu was also worried, she didn't really care. If one were to say who had the most confidence in Chu Yang in this world, it would be Mo Qingwu. No one else could. Chu Yang would definitely be fine. Perhaps the process would be a little dangerous, but he would definitely be fine. Otherwise, he wouldn't be Chu Yang, but my strength needs to increase faster. I heard that Chu Yang is now at the heavenly human level. I can't fall too far behind him. I have to work harder. Therefore, whenever Mo Qingwu was tired from training, she would come here to rest. It was good to not see him, but to hear his news. Ha ha ha, I've improved a lot today. Every time Mo Qingwu came, she would deliberately give these little fellows a blow. Therefore, everyone worked hard. Not only did they compete with Mo Qingwu, but they also competed with each other. They all wanted to fight for the first place. No matter what, they couldn't embarrass Big Brother Chu Yang in another place. And Mo Tianji walked out of the secret chamber. feeling the improvement of his cultivation, he couldn't help but feel gratified. The elixirs of the heavenly court are indeed extraordinary. The elixirs I snatched during this period are really quite useful. But then he heard a series of news about Chu Yang. In comparison, the little sense of accomplishment that had just risen in Motianji's heart instantly disappeared. So, Chu Yang has already reached this stage. I haven't improved enough. I still need to work harder. Go for it. Motianji fiercely ordered. Lord Motianji was now a bandit leader with more than 10,000 subordinates. He had always been a gentle and refined leader. But he had issued the strictest order for the first time. Continue plundering the entire world for me. Who cares who he is? It's the same for the officials. With Motianji's master of manipulation and calculation, and his ability to see through the mysteries of heaven, everything was naturally successful. The team continued to grow. Of course, there were more and more treasures. Oh, it can't be. Luo Kudi howled like a wolf. How can boss be so powerful? It's over, it's over. I've been left behind again. Damn it, why am I so unlucky? It's all your fault, you bastards. You didn't even manage to snatch anything useful. Hurry up and move on. The bandit leaders wanted to cry but had no tears. They wanted to say something but stopped. Big brother, do you have any conscience in your words? The things we snatched during this period of time have already pushed you to the peak of heaven's stage, and you're still not satisfied. Who the hell are you? Continue to snatch. Continue to snatch. Luo Kudi seemed to have gone crazy. We have to improve quickly. Everyone broke out in cold sweat. Looks like we have to work even harder. Gu Duxing stood by a river somewhere. No matter where they were, the reaction of the Tribulation brothers at this moment was shockingly unanimous. Damn it! We've fallen behind! And we've fallen so far behind? That won't do! We have to make the best use of the time to improve and catch up. The only thing they had in common was that whether it was Mo Tianji, Gu Duxing, Ao Xianyun, Xie Danqiong and the rest, none of them took the matter of Chu Yang being hunted to heart. It wasn't that they were too heartless or heartless. It was just that they had too much confidence in Chu Yang. Big brother Chu Yang being hunted down? It was normal. Too normal. If there was a day when Big Brother wasn't hunted down, that would be really abnormal. Especially when he came to this new world and was about to open up the scene, expand the situation, and establish a territory. How could he not be hunted down? Being hunted down was a matter of course, an appropriate matter. As for whether anything would happen, what a joke. Was there a need to ask this question? How could anything happen to Big Brother? How many times had he been hunted down? Every time, he wasn't hunted down, and in the end he was the one who was hunted down. Big Brother was the Tribulation Sword Master. What we have to do is to work hard to improve our own strength. One day in the future, we will still be together with Big Brother. We will still have to fight side by side. But now was not the time. With his insignificant cultivation level, he would only be a burden to boss if he went. Of course, other than the Tribulation brothers, there were also a few others who started their own actions after hearing this news. They moved from their respective worlds and rushed straight to the Demon Emperor sky as if they were flying. It was a young girl in white. Her features were picturesque and she was indescribably beautiful. Her figure was graceful and hard to describe. Such a young girl walking alone in the martial world was, of course, too eye-catching. Countless wild bees and butterflies, or some fellows who thought that they were rich, had family backgrounds, and had power, naturally had some dirty thoughts in their hearts. But wherever this beautiful young girl passed, those who dared to provoke and flirt with her had already turned into a pile of white bones. Those who thought that their families were powerful had their entire families turned into graveyards. She didn't seem to move, but after she passed by, people would realize that all those who had offended her had all turned into white bones. This journey was talked about by the later generations, and it was hailed as 10,000 miles of mountains and mountains, 10,000 miles of journey, gods and ghosts avoid, gods and ghosts cry. It was on this journey that the name of heavenly poisoned young miss suddenly resounded through the heavenly imperial court. There was another person who flew all the way, to the extent that he didn't even care about the considerable foundation that he had single-handedly built. This person looked very grotesque, and as he walked, there was also a rain of blood behind him. My poison technique is already close to completion, and my cultivation is also increasing rapidly. I will definitely be able to help Big Brother this time, the young girl in white thought. My demonic technique has already reached completion, and I feel that someone as handsome and dashing as me will definitely be useful. Even if I still can't kill those bastards, I'm still confident that I can charm a few of them to death. I still have this bit of confidence, the grotesque person thought, and I also need to fight. Of course, I especially miss that blissful girl who could find me as her husband. I'm very colorful, and she's even more colorful, right? That must be it. At another place in the heavenly imperial court, Wu Jueqing, dressed in a cotton robe, sat in a restaurant and drank wine. This place was less than 10,000 miles away from purple cloud heavens, where demons were running wild and the battles were extremely intense. Wu Jueqing cultivated and rushed all the way, and finally chose to settle down here. Here, at least I'll be closer to my brothers. Right now, he was listening attentively to the legend of Chu Yang's battle with Mo Yuntian in the restaurant. Wu Jueqing had a smile on his face, and he didn't comment. Right at this moment, 3 people walked into the restaurant together, chatting and laughing. Haha, old 8, what you said is really exciting. It's a pity that it's too far away, and we can't go there due to our duties. Otherwise, even I would want to go and help him. Not just you, why wouldn't I want to go too? Haha. I heard someone say something recently, and it's very trendy. I've noted it down, and it's just right for the current situation. It's like this: imagination is beautiful, but reality is cruel. Let's eat quickly. After eating, we still have to hurry back. We don't know how the battle is going, and if we lose to the other guys, we brothers will be embarrassed. Wu Jueqing poured and drank by himself, his face calm and indifferent, as if he didn't care about anything in the world. However, when he heard that person speak, he almost instinctively turned to take a look. But after this glance, Wu Jueqing's expression suddenly changed drastically. His face suddenly turned as white as snow. Then, Wu Jueqing's face suddenly flushed red, and his whole body started to tremble. The wine cup in his hand fell to the ground with a loud thud. It smashed into pieces. His lips trembled, wanting to say something, but he actually couldn't say anything. The other 3 also sensed the abnormal atmosphere and turned to look at him at the same time. The next moment, the 3 of them exclaimed in unison. In the eyes of the 3 of them, that young man who was lean and dressed in clothes as white as snow, with an elegant demeanor and a handsome face, was just like back then, just like in their dreams. At this moment, this young man was looking at them with an expression of ecstasy and disbelief. The look in his eyes, however, was clearly that the world had changed, and he was already in heaven and earth. The 3 of them felt their eyes heat up at the same time, and they roared at the same time. Second brother. Their roars were like crazy, and tears fell from the eyes of the 3 burly men at the same time. Chu Yang floated on the Mist River for a whole 7 days before he finally reached the opposite side. How wide was this river? Chu Yang really didn't know, and how deep was it? Chu Yang didn't know either. But when he finally stepped onto the land on the opposite side, Chu Yang only had one sentence in his heart. If we meet again in the clouds, please sweep away the fallen flowers in Jiangnan. Jiangnan, was it this Jiangnan? Chu Yang suddenly felt a fire burning in his heart. Demon Emperor Heaven! I, Chu Yang, have come. Who would have thought that I, Chu Yang, would come here with so much trouble and the hatred of the 2 sides of the world? What will be waiting for me? Is it an opportunity? A crisis? A turning point? An opportunity? Is it a danger? A natural disaster? A tribulation? Or something else? The moment he came ashore, Chu Yang, sharply, discovered that this demon Emperor Heaven was indeed different from the Eastern Royal Heaven. When he looked out from the eastern royal heaven, he saw that there were people everywhere. When he looked out from the demon emperor heaven, he saw that there were also people everywhere. However, people were very different from each other. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.